Okay, hello everybody. It's nice to see you all today. We are going to call this meeting to order and get started. So we are officially starting now at 6 p.m. This is the regular meeting of the Encinitas City Council, and it is Wednesday, September 14, 2022. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Kranz?
Here.
Councilmember Hinsey is absent. Councilmember Lyons?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Mosca?
Here.
And Mayor Blakespear.
Here.
Record will show all members of the City Council are present this evening with the exception of Councilmember Hinsey.
Okay, thank you. I would like to invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no special presentations or proclamations tonight, so we will move to oral communications, item number 5 on our agenda. Do we have oral communications?
Yes, we do, Mayor. We have approximately 10. And just a reminder to all the speakers, oral communications are for those items that are not listed on the agenda, and you will each have 3 minutes. I'll call you 3 at a time. The first 3 speakers are Richard Stern, Chris Calkins, and then Brian Blair.
Slide be brought up. Thank you.
Is your microphone on, Dick? Just try again and talk into it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and council members, my name is Dick Stern, and I'm a member of the Board of Directors for the Encinitas Ranch Community Association and a spokesman for the Four Corners HOA Consortium. Members of HOAs and neighborhoods that adjoin the Quail Gardens Drive and Saxony Road corridor are part of this consortium and are here with me tonight to share our concerns over the safety and traffic along this road corridor. Several of us from the consortium already met with many of you members of the council in the past few months, and we are following up on your recommendations. Next slide. This consortium was formed in May of this year and came together to work with the city to address our collective concerns. In total, we represent over 1,400 homes. We are also partnering with the E3 Collective that I think you're aware of, as well as with Chris Calkins, who's going to speak tonight, the CEO and president of the Carletus Company. Next slide. This slide highlights key facts and further background regarding the impending housing and developments planned along or close to this road corridor. All these points are supported by data that we have collected, much of which came directly from the city and can easily and willingly be shared. The key conclusions are over 1,300 housing units are being added to an area of approximately 1 square mile. Traffic volumes and excessive speeds are already a serious problem, and there is the overarching concern of safety. Next slide. So what are we talking about here? This is a map that displays each of the developments planned to be built within or in close proximity to the four corners of Saxony Road, Leucadia Boulevard, Quail Gardens Drive, and Encinitas Boulevard. Each of these are shown in white boxes with the associated number of units for each development, and these 2 collector roads are shown in yellow. Next slide. So with that information as background, here's our collective problem statement. As far as we can tell, there are no set or agreed to requirements, plans, or budgets to mitigate traffic, including the roads, sidewalks, entry and exit points for existing communities and the new developments. Existing residents firmly believe that there is already a serious threat to safety, quality of life, and liability. Our shared vision, and hopefully you share it with us, is to actively improve quality of life, achieve the city's stated goal of Vision Zero, and to mitigate our liabilities. Next slide. Next slide. Finally, lastly, we want to partner with the city to find the right long-term solutions or request that the matter of developing and implementing such solutions be placed on the City Council's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Chris Calkins, followed by Brian Blair, and then Mark Wilcox.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm Chris Calkins. I'm the president of Carlton's Company. I was involved in the planning and the development of the Encinitas Ranch and all of the area around there. And as a result of that, I'm fairly knowledgeable about the area. Can you put up the slide that shows the graphic? The issue that I want to ask you to focus on is I have an exhibit like this.
Let's stop his time at 2:40 so that he can get the visual
you.
up.
What you see here is you see the 1 mile stretch from Leucadia Boulevard to Encinitas Boulevard. In that 1 mile stretch, there are existing 11 entry points. They are the exclusive entry points for almost 700 homes now. As a matter of safety and of just public safety, the fact that these residences have no other way to get out and to get anywhere or for fire or safety to come in should be a matter of concern. The city has not chosen to require or to set up any kinds of improvements, traffic improvement or control environments in this entire section. In the meantime, you've approved housing developments at each end within several hundred feet, of the intersections, that are going to impose a huge additional burden on this area. It's time that the city started to spend some money on this side of the freeway. You've made a huge investment west of the freeway to make traffic on Pacific Coast Highway work better, to protect people, to slow down traffic, to manage it. You've done it on other streets. You haven't spent a dime on this street. And it's time that somebody paid attention to this part of the city. You've got Quail Botanical Gardens, you've got San Diego Botanical Gardens, you've got the school site. These are all areas that draw large numbers of people. In addition, it is the primary route for all of the students from east of the freeway that are going to San Diego Academy. The result of that is, in mornings and nights, it's virtually impossible now for folks at the north end and at the south end of this street to be able to get on it. So I want to call to your attention this area. This is not designed to accommodate the traffic that's there now. And the city, if the city needs to make an investment here and focus, both for the purposes of safety and for basically for the quality of life of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Brian Blair, followed by Mark Wilcox, and then Geraldine Kessler.
Just going to wait for a slide here to show up. I have 3. Perfect. Okay, so thank you. My name's Brian Blair. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. This image, I want to add my voice to the prior two. Very well spoken, very well said, and I want to address it, and I want to talk about one particular thing. This is Sunshine Gardens Apartments that was approved last year by the council. This is 140-ish units. This is at the bottom of Quail Gardens Drive. What's interesting about this is that this is the entrance, and it's directly across from one of these cul-de-sacs that was mentioned. This road is a nightmare every day. It's so sad that it's embarrassing. Like, you can't even get out of your neighborhood sometimes for 5 minutes. It's weird. You could never make a left turn during morning hours. It's scary to make left turns a lot of the time. It's really bizarre no matter what neighborhood you're coming out of. It just needs to be addressed, and that's already been touched on. But this is what I want to highlight. This is the main entrance in and out of this new apartment complex. If you go to the next slide. Okay, so yeah, so this is what it looks like from above. So you can see directly across from that is Quail Point Lane. And so that, to the bottom of this, if you go to the very last slide, you'll see that there's a blind turn when you come down this hill. This is the very bottom of Quail Gardens Drive. And so you're kind of coming down. Cars are always going at least 45, and I know because I've sat there and looked at the little digital readout, and it's, sometimes they're going 50. It's supposed to be a 35, which is already way too fast. This is going to be a crazy liability for the city if something's not done here. And so my hope is, and whatever the city spends to slow traffic down, to mitigate it, whether it's stop signs, stoplights, or roundabouts, that this be the highest priority because it's the most dangerous thing that's going to be seen in this area, because that's the entrance and exit. And when cars are going over the speed limit in both directions along Quail Gardens Drive, there will be brutal accidents that will 100% occur if this isn't addressed. The good news is, I think that a lot of these problems that are being highlighted tonight can be solved with stop signs. I think they can be solved with roundabouts. I know traffic lights are expensive, but they can be solved with that too. I think what this is a road that used to, I don't even think it was a throughway a long time ago. I don't think it connected. But it can be solved by thoughtfully putting in some combination of stop signs and roundabouts, and ideally slowing the speed down. You're going to be inviting a lot of families with these apartments and children. I think the city owes it to make it safe and slow for the existing residents and also the ones that we've invited or we're going to be inviting into these apartments and into these new units that will have children. Children live in apartments with bicycles. Let's put nice sidewalks in there, make it safe for them, and that's my ask tonight. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Mark Wilcox, followed by Geraldine Kessler, and then Scott Campbell.
Good evening, Mayor Blakespear and City Council members. Mark Wilcox here. I realize that the staff has been reviewing applications for marijuana storefronts here in our city. I think it's important to recognize that the majority of marijuana products sold at storefronts are highly concentrated THC products, THC being the component of marijuana that creates the intoxication. I would like to share this information from a well-respected online newsletter called Tablet.com, who wrote, "How Weed Became the New OxyContin." The reporter began by quoting Dr. Libby Stunt, an addiction psychiatrist who treats patients with severe drug dependency, which usually meant heroin, methamphetamines, and opioids. Beginning 5 years ago, she began to see something new. Quote, "I started seeing people with the worst psychosis symptoms that I have ever seen," she told the reporter, "and the worst delusions I have ever seen," end quote. These cases were even more acute than what she'd seen from psychosis patients on meth, and some of the delusions were accompanied by severe violence. But these patients were coming up positive only for cannabis, which is the romanticized term for marijuana. Cannabis products that are sold at marijuana storefronts contain no actual plant matter. They're made by putting pulverized marijuana into a tube and running butane, propane, ethanol, or carbon dioxide through it, which separates the THC from the rest of the plant. The end product is a wax that can be 70 to 80% THC. That wax can then be put into a vacuum oven and further concentrated into oils that are as much as 95 or even 99% THC. Known as dabs, they are extraordinarily dangerous to good public health. This Sunday, parents and community members will be participating in the annual Dab Walk in memory for those whose lives have been taken because of their use of dabs. It will be at 9 a.m. at the Duck Pond Park near Rancho Buena Vista High School in Vista, and we would invite anyone who would like to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to speak about the environmental nightmare Staver Torrey Pacific housing project on Melba Road that is slated to take down a grove of mature Torrey pines, 173 trees, and 30 smaller trees and native shrubs, also demoing 3 beautiful historical homes built in 1938 and an administrative older building, all based on the ill-fated density bonus law, AB 2345. I just want to commend the Planning Commission and UFAC for nominating and designating the beautiful Monterey cypress on Melba Road as a heritage tree. Side note, I had also placed my heritage application to the city February 2022, which included the Monterey cypress and the grouping of mature Torrey pines and a live oak on Melba Road. But somehow the single Monterey cypress was approved because the homeowner who lives behind it also filled out the application for the single tree, which we are thrilled about. However, it got nominated. It is officially a heritage tree, and it's wonderful for our neighborhood. But now we have additional trees that need to be preserved as well on the same level. The grouping, grove, row, or tree tunnel on Melba Road. That is why I would like you to take a closer look into the mature Torrey pines and coastal live oak, who also deserve the same consideration. Once the Urban Forest Advisory Committee takes the correct steps for my application. These trees are representative and a defining characteristic of the neighborhood. The frontage tree grouping can also be seen on aerial photos dating back from 1928 to 2016, except for a short period in the 90s when the few trees were missing on some images. From disease is the assumption based on what the neighbor says. But these few trees were replanted and are in good health and towering and flourishing currently on Melba. The aerial photos represent a visual historical record of the property. Please continue on the path of preservation and not the one of least resistance for the small, sacred, historical piece of property. It's the right thing to do for the neighborhood. I want to again remind you that this property abuts long-time tax-paying stellar senior residents who simply want to age in place. Please support our tight-knit community with soft green infrastructure funding, or perhaps with a bond measure and/or community funding or federal or state funds. I would also like to point out how this property is not just an open lot like many of these density bonus things. As I mentioned before, it has our neighborhood's tree canopy and those beautiful historical homes on the property. Please stop the madness on this environmental nightmare housing project and let these large senior populations live out the remaining days in their homes. Thank you for listening.
Oh, nice. Shows up. Good evening, council. My name's Scott Campbell. I live in the Acadia district. And let's start off with some niceties. I've been getting some of these cool flyers. And I'm honest, this is a really nice picture. It's a great picture. I mean, that's frameable stuff. The only flyers I've gotten so far. Oh, yes, it's game on. I forgot. It's cold in here. Yes, okay. So Encinitas review panel. We do have some review today. It's been a while. Oh, that's nice. Okay. All right, here we go. First off, thank you, council. I complained about the weeds at La Casa Boulevard, and I actually saw the guys working on it when I was going surfing. It's better. It's not good, but it's better. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I get the hang of this thing. Okay. There's an initiated 12A action. It's probably not going to happen, but I do have a recommendation. Tony and Joe, shift it to summer solstice, a much more workable day. July 4th is tough. It's really tough, but there's some plans on there. I rode the bee cycles. It worked. Look at my smile on my face. It worked great for what I was using it for. It worked really good, unbelievably good. To my dismay, there are none in the new Encinitas area. None. Zero. I had to put the bike in my car and drive it for what I wanted to use it for. I tried to buy a pass online. It wouldn't take my money. It wouldn't take it until I used a phone. Come on. This violates part of the use case, actually, to provide alternative methods of payment besides phones. And I called the service number, and it was out of line. But they recovered, and it did appear to be fixed. I called it yesterday, and it worked. Okay, let's do a little before and after contrast. You guys decide which is better for the front entryway. It would have been really nice if we could have had some decorative concrete and maybe a few more plants. It's not looking so good. Okay, I'm getting really slow here. The restriping, you guys failed 6 months ago, and we're doing it again. Come on. The introspection, yeah, we're going to spend $5 million on Pacific View, but back in 2013, we shut down La Casa Roundabout for $266,000, and we don't have nothing now. We have no crossings. Here we go. Yes, we waited 10 years. You know what? We've waited longer than that in La Costa. You guys should check out that 9/11/13 meeting. It's a really good one. These are some of the comments. And I'm sure you know most of those names on that list, except for old dude. I missed his name. I'm sorry. Priorities, roundabouts, and everything. Look at all the lists of undercrossings and overcrossings. Look at these beautiful plans. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Oh, okay, that's not part of this deal. All right, thank you very much.
Next speakers, Mark Maville, John Bandy, and Stephanie Wheeler.
Mark Maville, how you guys doing? Just want to apologize a little bit for my behavior, a little bit aggressive with you, but sometimes I just try to get people's attention. I'm going to run through some bullet statements here. Maybe you can write that down. I'll embellish as much as I can and add on. Try to get inside the 3 minutes. I'm used to this sort of thing anyway, but I'll just do the topics real quick. Homeless, lights at the pickleball courts is what's been requested or asked about. Speeding on 101, it's gotten worse. Curfew mandate enforced, 10:30 for the cantinas that are trying to stay open until 2:30 in the morning. Fake IDs, the sheriff department's doing a great job of trying to do everything they can, making sure that 13-year-olds with a bag of gummy bears don't go in and get a Crown Royal Black, right? And that's what's been happening. Stabbings, there's some more. I know that you guys didn't want to acknowledge the 5 that happened about a month or half ago, but that did happen. It went viral, and there's some more going on, or did go on. The drug and alcohol situation with the fentanyl and all that, still pretty edgy out there. Kids are just brazen, think that they're going to live forever. Kids are still dropping dead of the fentanyl abuse, along with the marijuana or whatever, but fentanyl's a lot worse. And the underage drinking, that's got to be looked at. My daughter won't even come into town just now, or just yet, until she can see that things are going to get a little bit better. On the homeless side of things, I am new coming into the community. $5,000 worth of stuff has already been stolen, so I know. Wallets gone, tablets, bikes, breaking into cars, whatever. It is criminal, and it is going on. Whatever mandates or whatever, you're allowing them easier for them to be here, spot them, question them, you're out. I've had at least 20 of them disappear, not in the way you might think, but they've been relocated. The creek that was clogged up, all because of them. The bathrooms destroyed, the raping in the parks, stealing from each other, stealing from others. I mean, you got to get it under control and stop that, and the only way to do that is to relocate. This is not a homeless shelter in Encinitas and Leucadia and whatnot, but they're everywhere. They're stealing in stores, they're stealing, like I said, from each other, other people, grabbing purses, snatching this, snatching that, in storefronts, defecating or whatever, and it's just got to be cleaned up. That's, you know, that part of it, but there is a lot of violence out there. I've been approached a couple of times. Hands are full, they're cowards, they'll hit you then, or whatever it may be, but they've been doing a great job, the sheriff, and thank God they're here because things have really, really quieted down. I'll be on the positive side. Now on the lights, that could be a good legacy thing, maybe, at the end, out the door, got the lights done, some other improvements, they need a little repair down here at the one by Moonlight, the pickleball thing, and the pickleball is a phenomenon, just like the fentanyl abuse, but one's positive, one's negative, so. We want the pickleball, right? I'll say. Okay, thank you.
Hello, Stephanie Wheeler. Thank you for speaking to the homeless. It seems like it's becoming a more prevalent issue with aggressiveness with the mentally ill and drug addicted homeless. I just recently went to the Homeless Action Committee's meeting a couple of weeks ago. There's not another one till November, but it was surprising to see that we've spent $100,000 on another study and a new committee, and nothing's come of their work in supporting the needs of the mentally ill and the drug-addicted homeless that are all over town. So any work you guys could do to support that committee would be beneficial to all of us in town. But I'm here also to speak as HOA president of One Channel Island, which is part of the Four Corners Consortium that Dick Stern spoke about earlier. And as Chris said, we are here to just ask you to please spend more money in the area on traffic mitigation and safety. As a parent, representing a community of 69 homes that is mostly parents or middle-aged to later-aged people that want quality of life and have invested there for quality of life as well as a good community to live in. There's overarching concerns now for safety and traffic with the new developments that are there and what's already just going on. So Tony, I know we've spoken to you before, and when we bring these things to you, you say, come here, bring it up, let's get it on the agenda. Let's get this stuff on the agenda to preserve this part of town, to grow this part of town properly. And please place this traffic improvement, mitigation, quality of life issue on the agenda and get this done right. If you guys are gonna vote for all of this housing, vote for it, but put the right plan in place to take care of the people that are there, that are paying taxes, that are giving to the community. Please just consider our wishes.
Next speaker is John Bandy, followed by Glenn Johnson, and then Kelly McCormick.
Hi, my name is John Bandy. I'm from Leucadia. I've lived here since I had hair. I have a daughter that joined San Diego Youth Softball last fall, and 10U, and I knew nothing about it beforehand. I have never encountered a finer group of individuals than the folks that run that place. Fantastic, wonderful. The girls have a wonderful time. It's great. In the spring, we went to All Stars, and I got to go see the facilities all over the community and Orange County. And it was telling what the facilities look like in the other areas. Ocean Beach was interesting. There were, of course, people doing drugs. America's Finest City in Kearny Mesa was a facility that any third world country would be proud of. Carlsbad, on the other hand, has AstroTurf and electronic scoreboards. A couple of months ago, two of the backstops fell down. They were rusted out, they fell down. My friends in Carlsbad said, the people that run your town are egregious rubes and hippies, and they'll never get around to fixing that for the kids. And I said, oh, nay, nay. They know they're gonna get it fixed. They're gonna do this. They said they're gonna talk about, oh, well, we have to go to Coastal Commission. We don't have the money. I know that's not the case. I know you're gonna get those fixed. The fall season has started. They're scrambling, trying to find a place. These are the daughters of the people that live here, rent here, been here for 30 years. And I'd like to see, I think the 28th is the next meeting, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna bring a bottle of champagne, because I know simple backstops are gonna get put up, and I wanna celebrate with you all. And I'm gonna see how many, I think there's like 300 or so girls in the fall. I'm gonna see how many I can get to come and congratulate you for taking care of those backstops. So I'm sure you're gonna get it done, and I thank you very much.
Sir, could I just confirm that you are talking about the Lake Sports Park,
Lake
and it's the
Sports
backstops at the Lake Sports Park?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn Johnson, followed by Kelly McCormick, Patricia Escobedo, and then Brian Campbell.
Yeah, I'm Glenn Johnson. I live on Kristen Court, just off of Quail Gardens Drive, and we've seen since when I bought my house about 25 years ago, Quail Gardens Drive dead-ended up past the Botanic Garden. Now we've seen it widened and improved. It's a very nice scenic street. Thank you, Chris Calkins, for designing such a beautiful street. But the problem is traffic on the four streets, Quail Gardens Drive, Saxony, and also Encinitas Boulevard and Leucadia Boulevard is increasing and increasing. And none of the housing element sites have been built to completion. As I look at it, I live within walking distance of 3 of the housing element sites, and when those get built out, we are going to have gridlock. I'd like to see some action before that happens. A good plan could be put together. Funding can be found. If you refer this to the Traffic Commission, Mobility and Traffic Safety Commission, I'm sure that I, as a member of the commission, will see what I can do to help work out a plan. I do want to remind you that several years back, the Leash Tag Foundation developed a plan for both Quail Gardens Drive and Saxony Boulevard. Unfortunately, they did not have the funding to do everything. They did fund some improvements out of their own pocket and left the rest of them for the city. And with housing sites coming in, I guess later today you'll hear all about it, about something that contributes to the traffic. We need to have a plan in place to remediate any problems that are already existing. And Quail Gardens Drive and Encinitas Boulevard are very, very poor level of service, F or so, during regular days. I don't know that there's anything worse than level of service F, but we'll find out. Thank you.
Hello, this is Kelly McCormick. I'm a public health educator with a focus on youth alcohol, tobacco, and drug prevention. And I'd like to ask that as you consider the regulatory framework for commercial marijuana businesses, please make consumer warning information part of the plan. Many of the risks are well known and not in dispute, including interactions with prescription medications, impaired driving, mental health risks for users under 25, and harm when used during pregnancy or while breastfeeding. California lawmakers had the opportunity to pass the Cannabis Right to Know Act, written by Senator Richard Pan, who is also a pediatrician. This would have offered some consumer protection by requiring warning labels on marijuana products. Unfortunately, Senator Pan pulled the bill after lobbyists for the marijuana industry successfully gutted it. In addition, consumers need information on safe storage of marijuana. Last month, Dr. Natalie Laub of Rady Children's Hospital reported an alarming rise in the number of toddlers admitted to Rady's emergency department due to marijuana ingestion. The majority of the children had consumed high THC fruity candies, mistaking them for regular candy. Of the toddlers brought into the ER, 58% were admitted for care, with 10% taken to the pediatric intensive care unit. Marijuana candies are sold in colorful, kid-friendly packaging, which is not child-resistant. Consumer education would be of great value in preventing such tragedies. Thank you.
Hi, speaking there. I'm Patricia Scamino. I live in the Acadia area. And my concern is if all those apartments are built where they want to do them on, off of Clark to Union, we just don't have enough room for all those cars, all that traffic. It's going to be a madhouse. It's going to be terrible. I've lived in that area since 1969, and it was nothing like it is now. And it's going to be worse with when you approve those apartments. It's going to be much, much worse. You wouldn't know because you don't live in that area, but I have, and I know. And it's going to be so bad. It's not funny. It's terrible. It's unsafe. It'll be very unsafe, and it's just not going to be good at all. It won't. I really beg you to please not approve those apartments. It'd be really bad for all of us that live in that community. Very bad, very bad. I live in the Clark community, I could say, Lucadia, in that area where we have, it's very narrow there. The streets are narrow. They're not wide and big. They're not. They're small. We don't have hardly no parking as is. So that's all I want to say. I want you to take that into consideration before you approve anything, please. No, what I'm saying is true. It's very true. If you drive to there, you will see what I mean. Okay? Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Brian Campbell?
Go to slide 3 if you can. Hello. Okay, this is just to orient ourselves. My,
Sir, if you're talking about the Clark appeal,
no,
you're not.
it's not. No, I'm just trying to associate or let people know where this is. So there was a Shea Homes development, like basically 2018 to 2020 was built in this area. Go to the next. No, it's not Channel Island. It's called the Alcove Shea Homes development. I'm here because 5 years ago I was healthy. I was a surfer. I was an engineering manager. I have lost $600,000 in wages in the past 5 years. I have severe neurological issues. I have had seizures. I'm very ill. And it's because the pesticides that were in that property on Shea Homes. And here's your document. You knew it was here. The city knew it was here. It had gamma chloridane, alpha chloridane. I remember an old guy from the neighborhood actually coming up here and presenting about that and about the risk and saying, hey, don't build the Shea Homes here. It's bad. This stuff's really bad. Here I am 5 years later. I know exactly what he's talking about. In this document, the final mitigated negative declaration, you guys checked the mark that it was less than a significant mitigation, less than significant risk to the hazard and hazardous materials, basically a health risk to the public. I'm telling you, it's not less than significant. It's very significant. And every single site that has these old greenhouses on them, they're using these things. In your document, I want to make it very clear, you say in your document, there's historical, basically you know that there's historical agriculture use of these pesticides and you list them right there. And actually the soil was sampled and it had dieldrin, chloridane, and endosulfane, as well as DDE, DDT, lead, and probably a bunch of other herbicides that aren't even listed. Samtec tested it on 2015. Construction still went forth, and you acted as if this mitigation plan, which says, hey, use a lot of water, monitor the soil. If it's 13 miles an hour wind or more, don't do construction. All of these requirements, there was a 3-foot or 2-foot fence. The dirt was just blowing everywhere. There's no water trucks. There's no water. This was to bury, it was supposed to bury all those pesticides under the earth there, and that's what was done. Well, at the end of the project, there's one truckload after another, semi-trucks full of dirt. So the actual materials were also transferred in our city. I don't think you guys knew about that. That same construction crew, Tony, you actually motioned to let them go without an environmental assessment right across the street. And now when I'm driving on Leucadia Boulevard in Saxony and looking at that huge field of dirt right now, I think, God, I hope no one's downwind of that, but there's a golf course right there, luckily not a preschool or something. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor, that does conclude oral communications.
Madam Mayor, if I could ask the city manager, the mobility element process is, I believe, wrapping up, and there's a draft of the plan and the EIR that is scheduled to be released this fall. Do you know about when that might be? Because I think that's an important part of the conversation related to Encinitas Boulevard, Leucadia Boulevard, Saxony, and Quail Gardens Drive.
I don't have a date offhand, but I can get one before the end of this segment.
Okay, and to all those who are interested, make sure you're signed up on the city's website to be able to get notification of that conversation, because it's, again, very critical.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the public comments tonight. We're going to move on to our consent calendar after our report from closed session. City Attorney?
There was no reportable action.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the posted agenda. And then moving to the consent calendar, item 8K, we do have a public speaker on that item.
Okay, I would entertain a motion on the balance from 8A to 8L.
So moved.
Okay, I'll second that.
Motion carries unanimously with Councilmember Hinsey absent. That takes us to item 8K. And the speaker is Jennifer Hewitson.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm sorry to pull an item from your consent calendar, but I think I've missed some meetings about the Santa Fe Drive Improvement Project. I know you want to do something positive for Santa Fe Drive, so don't get me wrong. I'm not claiming that you're not trying to do that, but regardless of how excited some folks are about the Santa Fe Drive improvements, I'm very much in favor of holding off on all advertising of work until you have full funding for the roundabout at Crest and Santa Fe. There's a blind hill. People speed like crazy. I worry about these sort of fancy protected bike lanes that can trap people into the bike lanes when people come out of driveways, which there are many on Santa Fe. They're more expensive than regular bike lanes, so it's something to think about as we think about budget. I feel like there should be a redesign and figure out how we can get that roundabout. There's more than one way to skin a cat. I know they're expensive, but claiming the cost makes it impossible. I don't think that doesn't ring true. As you add yet more money to the streetscape budget tonight, take pause and do the math. There is a limit to that project budget, and other road improvements may suffer. Citizens need this traffic calming roundabout ASAP. With the cumulative effects of the new apartment complexes and dangerous density that you seem to be adding to Santa Fe Drive, the new intense traffic will exacerbate an already harrowing situation at the top of that hill of Santa Fe and Crest, where cars, they race to speed through the next light at Lake as they're coming west, and soon are gonna be wiping somebody out. I run across with my dog every day. It's an urgent situation, and I hope that you'll consider holding off until, I know that you're doing the west end first, but the east end will be next, and I don't think you should go forward until that's funded, because otherwise it'll never happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Councilmember Lyons, did you have a comment on this?
Yes, certainly I will. Jennifer, I appreciate your comments and your passion for the project. Thanks. So I just want to give some background. I think we always are in a position where we have a whole lot more need than we have funding, and really we pay attention to that. We're trying to look at putting together a blue ribbon panel for infrastructure decision making, and that's tentatively going to be put forward in November of this year for us to, a citizens panel is how I envision it, with experts as well, to help us structure how we make all of our infrastructure decisions based on goals and objectives, based on Vision Zero, which is safety, and so forth. To the point of the Santa Fe Drive improvements, we have specific grant funding for this work that we're working within, and that's a wonderful thing. That's great. We've got some money. We're able to move some priorities forward. But about a year ago, we were out there standing on the roadway, making decisions, looking at our options, because we knew with the roundabout, the project was going to be more expensive than we had money for. So we discussed what the priorities should be, and I'm looking at our engineer over here who may also want to discuss that. But we looked at what our priorities were and what they should be for the project, and the safety and the continuity of pedestrian and bicycle circulation near the school was my top priority, and I think others would agree with that. And so we're headed forward with that as our phase one, and then the continuity and connection along the drive from I-5 all the way to El Camino Real, I think, is a really important safety improvement too. So unfortunately, the roundabout, which was really well supported and requested, is not able to be designed at this time. But that doesn't mean we can't look at how the traffic moves through that area. If it's moving too fast in that area, maybe we can do some sequencing of our lights, and whether we allow right turns on El Camino Real to Santa Fe Drive, and some other ways that we can influence the speed of traffic through that area. So I just wanted to give some people in the room some background on that and kind of explain the decision-making process, and that the funding of this project is limited to unique sources we've gotten for grants for this funding specifically. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Mosca.
Yeah, I was going to say basically the same thing as Councilmember Lyons. Thank you, Jennifer, for coming to our meeting today. Certainly the eastern portion of that roadway is of great importance to me and a lot of folks in my area of Liebenhain and New Encinitas, being able to get from the east side and utilize a lot of the amenities that we've installed on the western portion of our city, you know, ensuring that it's safe all the way up to Crest and beyond, right to El Camino Real, I think is incredibly important. This project was envisioned as the entire corridor, but I think when it came to the funding, we weren't able to get the whole thing done. But we do have grant funding for that western portion, and my hope is that we're going to get right back to the eastern portion before a long time and be able to get that done. So I think that this is an important first step in making improvements to that roadway. So I'm going to make a motion that we accept the recommendation and move it forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Krantz.
I would second that motion, and the fact is I've made it pretty clear that I am a big fan of roundabouts, and it's frustrating that we can't make that a part of this particular project, but it is my hope that we're far enough along with roundabout design that we might be able to compete for grants. Is that something that we're looking at, is whether we might be able to take advantage of the infrastructure money that is flowing currently?
Absolutely. We're always looking for grants. We have the plans for the western and the eastern phase pretty much done, and we always look for opportunities when we could put this in.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just say that this road is very heavily used by people trying to get to multiple schools, including SDA, and having protected bike lanes for the huge number of kids who are riding bikes is a really important part of the future of this corridor and throughout the city. So safely managing intersections with driveways is a really important part of that, but prioritizing the creation of protected bike lanes when we're doing road projects is something that I'm happy to see us normalizing, and doesn't have to be a conversation that comes up with every road project. It's definitely a little bit more expensive to do protected bike lanes, but there's just no question that it's safer. And so having a physical barrier protection between a car and a bicycle rider is really needs to happen. Especially if we want to be serious about reducing traffic congestion by mode shifting out of driving and into bicycle riding. And with the high school, just the amount of swirling traffic that goes around that twice a day, it's truly stunning. So this project is really needed, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have the roundabout built as well. But we should be moving forward with any grant money and any road project we can, really basically with a lot of haste. So I support this, and I do appreciate the comments, but I think it's important that we move forward tonight. So let's go ahead and vote.
Motion does carry unanimously with Councilmember Hinsey absent. And then, Mayor, we will now move to item 10A, which is our public hearing. And before that starts, we're going to have our translator, Anna, come up and make an announcement.
Okay, as Anna comes up, let's have the update from the city manager about the question from Councilmember Krantz.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The next mobility element scoping meeting is September 19th from 5 to 7 p.m. right next door in the poinsettia room.
Will that include a draft? The website says that there will be a draft of the mobility element. And, you know, I think that it's good to know that date, but maybe an update to the website to kind of post that date and explain a little bit more what the next steps are and when that draft will actually be available. Thank you.
Okay, Anna, we're eager for your translation services, so go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Buenas noches a todos. Mi nombre es Ana Nava Colín y soy traductora certificada. Y esta noche estoy aquí para traducir e interpretar al español el asunto 10A, que es la apelación de la avenida Clark. Todos los miembros del público que quieran escuchar la traducción al español pueden hacerlo desde esta sala o desde sus hogares, marcando el número de teléfono 425-436-6334. El código de acceso es el 1651745. Por favor, al entrar a la llamada, les pido que pongan su teléfono en silencio, en mute, para que la traducción se lleve a cabo sin interrupciones. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now move forward, and I'll announce the procedures for this appeal. This is item 10A. So first, we will have a staff report given, and then I will ask council to disclose any other information that they've received that is not included in the staff report, and we'll have preliminary questions from council, if there are any. And then I will open the public comment period, and the appellant applicant will go first for 10 minutes, and then the appellant non-applicant goes second. Then we'll have public speakers, rebuttal by appellant, non-applicant, and then rebuttal by applicant, appellant. And then I'll close the public hearing. We'll have council discussion and action. So with that, we will ask for the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and public. This is a consideration of the Clark Apartments project and to consider 2 timely filed appeals. The project's located at 672, 682, and 556 Union. It's located between Clark and Puebla and Union Street, just east of Interstate 5. The surrounding uses are single-family residences to the north, east, and south. Also to the south, there are some commercial uses, some existing nurseries, and a pet hotel directly across the street. The site was allocated as one of our housing element sites to meet our regional housing needs assessments for the city of Encinitas. It was referred to as Site 8031, also the Meyer site. As part of our housing update, it was rezoned to the R30 overlay zone. It's also located in our scenic visual corridor, special study, and coastal overlay zone. The proposed project is a design review permit, a boundary adjustment, minor use permit modification, and a coastal development permit. It includes the demolition of 2 existing single-family homes, some greenhouses and accessory structures, and the construction of a 199-unit apartment complex, as you see in the picture, and it's across 17 detached structures. It includes 159 market rate units, 10 low income, and those will be restricted for up to 55 years, and then 30 low income units will be restricted in perpetuity. Also includes leasing, amenity, and grading and parking. And then again, this is a by right project, so it's exempt from CEQA. It does not require a subdivision, includes 20% affordable units, and excuse me. Also, it's required, even though it's required to do discretionary permits, it's not subject to CEQA. The project has two key access points. So on Union has ingress and egress. Clark Avenue has egress only. And the reason for that is, as illustrated on my cursor, there's a pinch point of 20 feet, whereas normally it would require 24 feet for two-way access. The project went to the Planning Commission on August 4th, 2022. The project was denied by Planning Commission 4-0 with one of our commissioners absent, and the commission made two findings, which are illustrated in the slide. The first one is the Planning Commission finds the project is proposing a boundary adjustment with 4 lots. Overall, it has 6 lots, and it's considered a subdivision, therefore subject to CEQA and environmental analysis within EIR. The second finding is the project did not do adequate outreach. It did not do, with the CPP, include a notice in Spanish. There's 2 timely appeals, as I indicated before. One was filed by Western Pacific Properties on August 12th, 2022. The second was the Clark Development Action Group, which was filed on August 15th, 2022. The first appeal for consideration is the Western Pacific Properties appeal that was filed first. And they're appealing to overturn the 2 Planning Commission findings. The first claim by the Western National Properties was the boundary adjustment is to consolidate 4 lots and does not meet the definition of a subdivision under the MAP Act. Second one was there's no discretionary review required, and the project is exempt from CEQA. It qualifies per state density bonus law and waivers as they identified in their density bonus report, and it complies with all the R30 development standards. Staff's response to this first claim is the consolidation of 4 lots as illustrated in the plat designed by their land surveyor. See the items 1 through 4 are the 4 lots to be consolidated into 1 lot. Lots 23 and 24 at the top are to remain as is with no changes in terms of the boundaries. Overall, the project complies with all of the R30 development standards. There's no subdivision or condominium map proposed with the project. And that was indicated and presented to the Planning Commission and through the density bonus report. And is exempt from environmental review under Government Code Section 65583.21 as a by right project. The applicant's second claim is CPP is not required because it's a ministerial permit, but was conducted voluntarily by the applicant. And the second piece of that is there's no identifiable objective requirement to conduct a CPP meeting in Spanish. The staff does concur that the city has no identified requirement for public notices to be in Spanish. We would contest that the CPP is required as identified in our code. However, the CPP was conducted, it was reviewed, properly noticed, meeting held, and approved in accordance with our municipal code and our CPP handout and requirements. The second appeal before you tonight is the Clark Development Action Group. The first claim with this, again, is the lot line adjustment violates our Encinitas Municipal Code, Chapter 2470, and because it exceeds a limit of 4 parcels for the lot line adjustment, the project does not comply with setbacks, lot width, lot depth, and lot area. The law adjustment will not promote the available design standards and guidelines in the zoning and development code, and it will create a condition that doesn't comply with our building regulations. Staff response, as in the report, was again it is 4 lots just being adjusted. The other 2 lots are to remain as is. The lot line adjustment complies with lot width, lot depth, and lot area. There's nothing presented in terms of additional evidence that shows that it doesn't. And also it complies with all the density bonus requirements and density bonus law. The project also is consistent with the objective design standards we can't apply subjective design standards to a housing element site for a by-right project. The second claim by CDEG is there'd be significant adverse impacts on health and safety from traffic and transportation, and that's due to unsafe and dangerous conditions from substandard road capacities on Clark Avenue and Union Street with increased vehicular traffic on under capacity designed and configured roads. Again, this is a by right project and not subject to CEQA and levels of significance. Again, there's 2 access locations. There's only 1 required, and that's ingress on Union and ingress on Clark. Our fire departments reviewed the project and determined its adequate access both on site to comply with the fire code, as well as adequate access for the adjacent streets on Union Street, Puebla, and Clark. Our city traffic engineers determined that the traffic analysis completed by LOS Engineering to be consistent with our general plan, and it's really just policy of 1.3. And the traffic study was determined to have adequate capacity for both Clark and Union. The third claim by the appellant for CDEG is that the project will have a significant adverse health and safety impact because it cannot, because the cancer risk estimate from the Clark project is 27 times greater than the minimal estimated 1.8 and 1 million. Again, we don't look at significant levels with a by right project, and this project is statutorily exempt from CEQA, our government code section 65583.2H, and there's no objective standards that have been submitted or evidenced to justify that claim. Claim 4, again, the project requires CEQA review. CDEG did agree with some of the Planning Commission's determination findings and submitted some additional evidence. They argued that the project may have potentially significant air quality, health risk, and greenhouse gas impacts. However, there's been no evidence submitted to justify that claim with objective design standards from the city. It's statutorily exempt from CEQA per sections 65583.2H and I. And again, this is the by right project, includes 20% affordable units. And also, there's also a section with our Encinitas Municipal Code within our Chapter 24, specifically Section 2404.030B2, which states that boundary adjustment is exempt as described in Government Code Section 66412 and 66412.1. So boundary adjustment is not a subdivision. There's key kind of public input. It happened during the project review. Staff received it during the citizen participation process, and the applicant also did additional outreach after the CPP process at our Planning Commission meeting. And then just as of last Friday, the city received a letter from the State Housing and Community Development in support of the project. And then also any input tonight regarding the appeal hearing. Staff's recommendation of the project is to adopt Resolution 2022 as part of the attachments 06 with the recommendations and findings and conditions. We're recommending to grant the appeal 5568 2022 for Western National Properties and overturn the Planning Commission denial, and then deny the second appeal, which is appeal 5572 2022 for the Clark Development Action Group. Staff's available for any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I will ask council to disclose any additional information received. Councilmember Krantz.
Yes, I watched the Planning Commission meeting video, and following that, I spoke with the attorney for the developer about some of the traffic issues that were raised. I also received from the Housing and Community Development Division, Housing and Community Development Department in Sacramento, a letter of support and technical assistance, which came outside of the staff report and the documents that we received through that report. So
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Lyons.
I only am declaring that I watched the Planning Commission webcast.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Deputy
I've
Mayor.
received nothing that's not already in the record.
And I read the HCD letter that was in response to this from, that we received over email. So any preliminary questions from council? I don't see any. So I will officially open the public comment period. And so for 10 minutes, we now have the appellant applicant. So that is Western National Properties.
Members of the council, Mayor, Marco Gonzalez with Coast Law Group here on behalf of Western National Group. We have our clients and our consultants here, and they're available to answer any questions that you might have, not just on the appeals, but on the findings that we're asking you to make to approve the project. As mentioned by staff, this is an appeal of a denial, and therefore, in order to approve this project, if you agree with staff recommendations, you do also have to approve the resolution and the findings that are included in your staff report. We ask that you grant our appeal, you deny CDAG's appeal, and you approve the project. We believe that this project is well-designed and well-sited. It's important to note that this is a true 20% project, meaning 20% of the base density, because we haven't utilized state density bonus law to provide any more than what the base zoning allows. We could have proposed up to 299 units here and taken advantage of a significant number of parking reductions to make that fit. But because Western National Properties desires to have a project that fits in the community, desires to provide sufficient parking, and wants to be an actual partner with the community in the long term, they took advantage of only the base level zoning that was allowed here. But getting into the appeal, there are some overarching issues. I'm going to go through 3 slides of overarching issues that apply to all of your considerations. As staff mentioned, this is a by right housing development. It's important to remember that as a by right housing development, there are no additional discretionary permits that you can require, and you're not allowed to use your subjective judgment when you analyze whether this project complied. The rules are to be predictable, and the process under by right is supposed to be one that you can rely on without the vagaries of subjective discretion by the decision-making body. Importantly, the legal standard that applies here derives from the Housing Accountability Act, in that if you're going to deny or reduce the density of a project, you have to have specific adverse impacts on public health or safety that are based on objective standards. There has to be no feasible way to mitigate those public health and safety impacts. And the legislature in the actual law makes clear that these specific adverse impacts on health and safety arise very infrequently. Now, the most important thing to remember is objective standards do not allow you to exercise discretion. That means no personal or subjective judgment. It has to be uniformly verifiable and by reference to an external and uniform benchmark or criterion. And importantly, whatever standard you apply has to be available to the officials, to the applicants, to the public before the submittal of an application. I think that's something that you can really think about is no matter what we apply for, you have to be able to say what the standard is regardless of what it is that we applied for. And then we have to meet that standard. Some examples of objective standards are things like height limits, FAR, setbacks, lot coverage, parking stall width. They're numbers that you can rely on. The courts have found a number of things, a number of standards that are not objective, and these are the ones that oftentimes we call community character standards. Addressing an unneat met for senior housing, special care shall be taken to avoid obstructing views. These are not numerical standards or objective standards that we can rely on, and applying that type of subjective standard would be inappropriate here. So getting to the appeal itself, appeal issue number 1, I don't think there's much to say about this. While the applicant very much supports this requirement being applied in the future to all projects, including our 30 projects, the fact is there is no Spanish-speaking notice requirement in the municipal code, and as a result, we can't point to something that says if X% of the public is Spanish-speaking or if a certain number of homes were Spanish-speaking within a certain number of years. There's just no standard that we can rely on to say that we were supposed to have given notice in Spanish. It was never raised by the public. It was never demanded of us by city staff. It really only came up on the eve of the Planning Commission hearing. And at that point, we'd already agreed that translation services is something that we would support at both Planning Commission and at City Council. The second standard is the subdivision issue, and I believe that staff has really gone over this sufficiently. There's simply no legal reason why we can't choose 4 lots to combine, 2 lots to stay the same, and then address any inconsistencies with the municipal code through state density bonus law. I think the image that staff put up was pretty similar to this, if not more clear. But I think what the real issue that you hear from the appellant or from the CDAG group, and really what was bought into by the Planning Commission, is this notion that if you have 6 units, that alone makes it a subdivision. And as the HCD letter pointed out, that's simply not a correct reading of state law. I think it's also important to realize that the state density bonus law waiver process was specifically intended for this type of situation, where you have, looking at the graphic, the 2 blue lines, where you have these internal lot lines that bisect buildings, and that we admit this isn't a gotcha moment. We will not comply with those internal lot line setbacks, but so what? No one has pointed to any impact. No one has pointed to any public health and safety result from that. And frankly, the condition that we maintain these properties in common ownership really obviates the need for internal setbacks anyways. So moving forward, we get to CDAG's awkward appeal. And I call it an awkward appeal because they won at Planning Commission. They got a unanimous denial, and yet they still felt the need to raise not only the issues that they were successful on, but also a host of other issues that they thought the Planning Commission didn't go far enough. What's important to note is that both in their letters to the Planning Commission and in their appeal, they fail to identify significant impacts that result in quantifiable, direct, unavoidable public health or safety impacts. There are no objective standards, there are opinions and there are speculations, but there's really nothing for them to hang their hat on other than the hope that you agree with their subdivision argument and make the whole thing subject to CEQA. Getting to the traffic and transportation issues, with respect to Clark Avenue, again, we looked for objective standards months and months and months before when we started talking with the traffic department. Tell us what we need to accomplish here in terms of road design, in terms of site design. You know, what are the impacts of our project? Well, we did a traffic study, and it turns out we're operating at levels of service that are acceptable. This traffic study was done taking into consideration COVID. I know some folks in the press have postulated that we didn't, but we went back and did true-up traffic counts post-COVID. We accommodated for it using other counts that were done before COVID. It was absolutely considered. But what's important is this is a non-circulation, non-general plan circulation element road, and the city does not have legal standards for the design of these roads, nor does it have capacity standards. So what's important is that when you look at this section of Clark, there is nothing that would require us or you at this time with respect to our development to go in and improve this road. That isn't to say that the road doesn't have problems, because as we can see by this graphic, there is a pinch point approximately 450 feet to the north of the project where we're not utilizing the full right-of-way. And we know that. We know that when we move down the project site, we see parking on one side of the road where, frankly, by your own resolution from 1991, that's not supposed to be allowed. Come on. As was mentioned by staff, the conversion to an egress only on Clark Avenue was a result of a fire safety issue. Their traffic consultant had postulated that it was a result of safety issues on the road. It's not true. It's up to you as a city to address the non-conforming aspect of Clark Avenue. The traffic study that we completed does not show that we're going to exceed the level of service or the capacity for that road. But we agree that complying with Resolution 9139 and red curbing that 450-foot section would probably be a good thing, but the residents have to understand that you lose parking on the street. Now, no one's actually entitled to parking on the street. It's a public thoroughfare, but folks have gotten used to it over time, and it's something that's going to be, we understand, hard for them to accept if that gets done.
We're going to save the bulk of our issues, not dealing with traffic and transportation, for rebuttal. But with respect to Union Street, we would also say the same. Even though there is restriction on parking on one side, there are no objective design standards. We are more than happy to come back through the Traffic Commission and through this body if after the project is developed, it's decided that there should be traffic calming, if it's decided that there should be a stop sign at the end of the street. We're more than happy to pay for those types of improvements. And in fact, if we're going to improve Union Street to a full curb, one-side parking, DG pathway, we're more than happy to pay our fair share percentage of that. But absent objective design standards at this time and absent a nexus, there's simply no evidence upon which we can be saddled with the improvement of that entire street in and of ourselves. So with respect to the claims of air quality impacts and general plan compliance, we're going to address those on rebuttal. But thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. So next we have the non-applicant appellant who goes next with 10 minutes. So that's the Clark Development Group.
Good evening, Council. Craig Sherman on behalf of Appellant CDAG, Clark Development Action Group. Let me start out by the purpose and basis for the appeal. Mr. Gonzalez stated it's an awkward appeal, but I think it's not an awkward appeal because we believe an appeal because there were additional findings and reasons that support the Planning Commission's decision to deny the project, and we wanted to present those fully. And I think the applicant itself in its appeal noted that was that anything that we failed to raise in our own appeal, we wouldn't be allowed to talk about here at council. So it was the right thing to do. We teed it up for council, and I think that you'll take note of the points that we're making for the bases, the additional bases that the Planning Commission could have and should have made and support a more full and robust denial for the reasons. So, first of all, we submitted a couple approaches and options here for the council. One is to deny on the basis of our appeal, or grant our appeal and deny the project. The second would be to continue for the more fuller considerations of the comments that were submitted. I note that the supplemental materials that were provided on September 7th per code didn't make it into the staff report and weren't covered for some reason or another. That was for the timeline. So those are additional reasons and bases for the for a continuance to consider some more of these options. So that's the reason for the additional basis and for some further consideration. The principal reasons for denying the project is because of the traffic and the objective standards that are occurring in this project. The problem that occurred with this project early on was that the road did not have a classification. So staff decided a particular road classification that it would utilize for it being a residential collector, but the fact of the matter is this project and this road and its standards is not that type of a road. The Clark, going back to the prior slide, the Clark and Union Streets are local roads that were constructed for low density R3 and R5 zones, agricultural zoning. And utilizing an R30 zone is misleading because the condition of the existing roadways were not studied or considered in the environmental assessment for the housing for the fifth cycle. This project came up late. It was not a part of the process. It was never studied in these road conditions. For upzoning this to the R30 is something that was never considered. So the designation of Clark and Union Streets as residential collectors with a capacity of 4,500 ADT is incorrect. And the further fact of the matter is that the traffic study that was done for the intersection of showed an LOS E capacity for a 4,500 capacity road when it's not that road. So on the next slide, you can see the standards, objective standards for what these road classifications are supposed to be. A residential is supposed to be a minimum of 40 feet of actual road, which this is not and not providing. So it defies the reality, and these are objective numbers, that 40 feet. It leads to the incorrect assumptions about the LOS at Clark and Leucadia, and even the fact that this road does not meet this objective standard was mentioned by the traffic engineer at the Planning Commission, for those who watched the proceedings, the city's engineer, which requires 40 feet of pavement. So on the next slide, if you look at these road standards of what this road isn't, Union and Clark are local residential or rural roads with ingress and egress to home driveways. And even if it were true, Union and Clark were true two-way streets, the maximum capacity would be 1,500 ADT, not 4,500. So it's a wrong objective standard. So this completely changes both the LOS calculations and the public health and safety capacity and ability for these cars to be accommodated on these roads. Here on slide 6, you look at the objective standard for what a residential collector is supposed to be, and this does not meet that standard. So these roads cannot support the project. You need the 12 feet for each of the 20, for a total of 24 feet of passing, and you need the 8 feet on each shoulder. And staff admits that it is not that width. This shows an example looking at Union and Clark Avenue. These streets are clearly not two-way residential collectors. As depicted in the images, they cannot reasonably function as two-way streets. Adding an additional approximately 1,200 ADT on these streets will exceed the physical capacity of these streets. And this is not theoretical. This is actual, that the impacts that we'll have, and that these are not residential collector streets. And going back to General Plan Policy 1.3, it's a mandatory policy. It should prohibit development that results in the level of service of E or F at any intersection when no alternative exists, and unless no alternatives exist and overriding public need can be demonstrated. So conceptually, or for argument purposes from the applicant, you hear the comment that, well, these roads are like this, and it's not our job, duty, objective, requirement to fix these roads. Well, they're not fixing the roads. They're building and designing the roads to accommodate their project. You know, this is a causation, a nexus from the project that they're required to have these roads built to accommodate the project. You've heard a speaker earlier today from the Homeowners Association saying, you know, you're putting in these projects and then after the fact, you're looking for money to try to fix them. Well, you're supposed to condition the projects for public and health safety reasons so that the cars can pass, that the people can safely pass. Exactly the standard that you're provided in the government code for by right projects to condition the project for public health and safety purposes. You've got an objective standard here, you've got a road problem here, and it's the developer's duty and responsibility to accommodate safe passage. And it's your duty and role to see that it's conditioned and that's passed. So that's why we appealed and asked that you support the denial, or grant our appeal and deny the project until it can be safely designed for vehicular and bicycle and pedestrian traffic. The other points we raised, the health and safety risks. Staff presents the argument that it's a CEQA, there's a CEQA exemption, you can't consider public health and safety because, well, just it's a by right, you can't look at those types of impacts at all. Well, that's not true because these are objective standards and numbers and they're set forth in a quantified number of what is an acceptable health risk where so many people die from the construction of a project or over time. And with the numbers 27 times greater than a standard and a number that people know about, it's been studied and it's a factor, that's not subjective, that's objective. So once again, the finding that can be made under the government code for a denial based upon public and health and safety impacts, this is one of those bases. And then the supporting information was in the study by SWAPE, the consultant that was hired to do the numbers, and those numbers are not contested. And then lastly, and we'll cover a fair amount of this in our rebuttal argument as well as the subdivision. The subdivision argument is that it is 6 lots. But one of the big problems is that the resulting 2 lots are non-conforming to R30. So it's convenient to excise lots 23 and 24 to say, well, we're not really touching those, we don't really need those, but you're doing a boundary adjustment for one project. It's a 6-lot project, and the way that it's gerrymandering with regards to those 2 remnant lots are exactly why the boundary adjustment, and it is a subdivision act comprehensively under the municipal code as well, and I'll talk about that later as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Could you let me know how many public speakers we have, please?
We have 16.
Okay. We're going to take a 7-minute break and then get to the public speakers and then the rebuttals by both appellant and non-appellant.
At a time, when I call you, you will have 3 minutes. First three speakers, Amy Bennett, Valerie Souder, followed by Amy Staste. Okay, thank you. Amy? Yes, Amy.
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for having this meeting. My name's Amy Bennett. I live on Del Rio in the Flats. And I'm going to read a little bit of an op-ed that was just in the Encinitas Advocate that I wrote last week. So I've just got some excerpts from that. Over the years, the traffic in the Flats has really metastasized. My neighbor was hit by a car walking with his wife. Saxony is absolutely uncrossable at any point. High-speed accidents happen frequently on Leucadia Boulevard, and more than once, I have been within minutes of cars careening over the sidewalk at Saxony and Leucadia Boulevard, and had I been there, I would have been hit. And this happened again just last week. So we've had a bicyclist die, we have had dogs die. You know, what's in store for our children? I don't think this is subjective. I think this is very real. The August 4th Planning Commission meeting about Clark left me really worried. The traffic studies are written so that they can be approved. Of course they are. That's the point of hiring someone to do it. I got a copy of the study. I could not make heads or tails of it. And the developers are adamant that their study simply cannot be refuted by us, whether there's just no other realities that exist, safety or otherwise, can be considered, and I just disagree. The study shows that the project does not increase traffic more than a particular increment. I'm not sure what that increment is, why it was designed. It's exempt from CEQA, but is it exempt from having you protect our safety? Is it okay for the city council to allow this unsafe situation to continue? How can we intentionally decide to make it worse? Pretty much everybody at that planning commission meeting could see that this is not a safe area within the Flats. Commissioner Sherrod reflected that the city had inherited substandard roads when we were incorporated, and we can't wave a magic wand, but why do we have to make them worse? Unlike Encinitas Ranch and Clark, and I appreciate the presentations earlier, with the Clark project, it's internal. This isn't about a cul-de-sac area like Encinitas Ranch or One Channel Island or Fox Point, where there's no traffic going in or out of people other than the ones that live there. We are impacted by every single trip in those 4 blocks of the Flats. You know, if you have a cul-de-sac planned community, you avoid that. This is an older community. We don't have that luxury. And lastly, really, without the council's help, the Flats is just going to become an on-ramp to the freeway, and we can just order our signs now to put outside our, you know, our front doors this way to I-5 northbound or southbound. So, you know, in this city, our ideal is not to kick the underdogs that live in the Flats, but to step up and protect the underdog and not sacrifice us. So please do the right thing and protect our safety. Thank you.
Valerie Souder.
Okay, I'm going to read my presentation too, so I get it all done within 3 minutes. Okay, I come before the City Council this evening to ask them to deny the Clark Avenue development. This development is a nightmare for the residents, not only on Clark Avenue and the Tortilla Flats neighborhood, but especially for the Union Street homeowners whose street will take the brunt of the massive traffic increase generated from this development. The backup of cars every morning trying to turn onto Saxony, especially left turns, will be a traffic horror story for the Union Street residents who won't be able to pull out of their driveways due to the line of backed up cars blocking their access. How long will they be forced to wait for a break in the steady stream of traffic generated every day by this overly dense project to safely back out of their driveways? Saxony is already an overburdened connector street that can hardly accommodate the current traffic demand. much less adding an additional 1,000 to 2,000 more car trips a day on it. I own a home on Union Street, and the street is narrow with no sidewalks or bike lanes. The residents on that street will never again be able to walk or bike safely on Union Street or Clark Avenue if this inappropriate project is allowed. Both streets will become mini freeways. It is grossly unjust that one group of citizens in their established neighborhoods are degraded and the safety and well-being of the residents and their quality of life are sacrificed for the benefit of another group who profits at the expense of their loss. Also, the incredible increase in toxic gas and diesel fumes generated from the gross increase in car trips down both Clark and Union Streets would be greatly detrimental to the health and quality of life of the residents in those neighborhoods. Plus, they would never again be able to enjoy the privilege of parking in front of their homes or walking and biking safely down their streets. Neither Union Street nor Clark Avenue can accommodate the safety of sidewalks for pedestrians, bike lanes for cyclists, and street parking for the residents of those two streets due to the narrowness of both streets that cannot be widened or mitigated for the safety and interests of both the developers and residents. Therefore, for that reason and all the reasons mentioned above, I urgently and strongly request that the City Council join with the Planning Department in their wisdom and good judgment in denying this project in its entirety once and for all. City Council, please just find the courage, good judgment, good sense, and conscience to just say no. Thank you.
Following Amy is Geraldine Kessler, Scott Campbell, and then Lauren Linhoff.
Hi, my name is Amy Stosny, and I am a resident of the Flats since 1997. We live on Del Riego. I was here 4 years ago in 2018, I remember speaking, when we were talking about some of this previously. We've lived there for the 25 years. Our son was born, at Encinitas Hospital, went to SDA, graduated in 2020. So we've been a part of this neighborhood. I've been working from home. I work for the biotech clinical research industry, but I've been working from home actually since 2002. And then I go in now to my office on Torrey Pines periodically. But I've seen the neighborhood change over time. Of course, the last couple years, because of COVID, right, we were all locked in for a while, so walking through the streets and seeing the changes. So one part I wanted to talk about here is the ADUs, that we're not taking into consideration how many ADUs, how many accessory dwelling units we've added to the neighborhood. So why can't we, we have those. We also have several Habitat for Humanity homes. And so we already are contributing greatly to the density and to to try to get the numbers of housing. So we need to take that into account. We have all those ADUs. We also have, because of this surge of ADUs, it's impacting our parking, because we have all these rules that you can have ADUs, but we don't have to have parking for them. So we're gonna add this 199 more units and then deal with also the ADUs that we already have. And so we're concerned of where is everybody gonna park? Where are we gonna be able to walk through the neighborhood? We're already dodging cars as it is. So we need that, so we need to think about this whole thing. There was mention that we're exempt from CEQA, and there's by right rules, but from a humanity perspective, how can we say we don't have to take this into account? We don't have to take into account the influx of all the cars, the number of people in that area and that we already have. So, just adding this development here in our neighborhood will make it worse for all of us in our little neighborhood and also on Union Street. We ask that you address and that we do hold this off. We want you to deny the project, but if you're going to continue with it, if you're going to unanimously vote for it, look at the parking, do something about it. wait for Kelly to return too. She's our district person, so it's kind of concerning. We're pushing this ahead without her here. You know, she's supposed to represent us. So we ask you to consider the parking, consider, you know, making sure they park in the area and not in our neighborhood where we already don't have enough. Maybe do permits, you know, just consider all of this, and please stop saying it's a CEQA by right when you're forgetting that we're human beings, and we need to think about us, so.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't going to speak tonight, but sometimes I just feel so empathetic for this people. So I'm sorry if it's rambling. I've been coming to this for 2 years since that environmental nightmare housing project on Melba has been going on. And I feel for these people, all these residents, and I feel like continuously being bullied by the developers. And it's really hard for me to see. If our developer only worked just a little bit with the community rather than keep saying, I have this right to do this, to build this, and we wouldn't be in this situation and arguing continuously. And like I said, I'm in healthcare, so I see the stress that is brought on by people taking trees down and ruining communities that were once, you know, stable environments. And I see the cancer that, you know, this toxins things. So I'm seeing another side of this. But what I can't take seeing is the bullying consistently and these developers telling them what they have the right to do in these longtime residents' town. It's just really upsetting for me to see that. And I just want to know why Sacramento is getting involved in our local stuff. Why do they have to get, I mean, I'm just curious because let us try to handle it. It's like when I have a problem with, let's just say a family member, I go directly to them and I work it out. I don't go to the top of the line. I do like a one-on-one. And that kind of works better for people. And if these, you know, rather than tell them what the law is and what they get to do, it's pretty annoying to see that from a resident that's been pretty happy with the way things are run for 20-some years living here. So it's really difficult to see that with the developers. And they're just looking at the ground. They're not even looking at these poor people that are telling them what they are concerned with. And that is upsetting for me to see. And they really missed the mark on this CPP thing by not, I mean, everybody was locked down during COVID. I mean, you should have done a little bit more outreach for these communities. They're longtime senior people, and a lot of them are, you know, people that are Hispanic people. So, I mean, you really should have tried harder. It's very upsetting to see that. And, you know, I also listened to all the meetings, but the traffic one time I listened to, and this Brian Grover, he said that one time that, you know, those people were being assaulted, or they're under siege over by TJ Maxx, that street, and they wanted to make it private. And Brian Grover stood up and said, it's a human issue. And I feel like a lot of times it's a human issues that these people are talking about. I mean, forget the lawyers and forget what they get to do. Just, you know, work with the community. Have like a middle person just to talk to them. Like I said, you know, it's very upsetting to see people telling them what they can do in this town when they're not paying the taxes. Thank you for listening.
Okay, I have a show starting up. My name is Scott Campbell. I live in the Acadia District. And I'd like to remind the council that their number one priority is public health and safety, more than anything for the city. Okay. Some of this, we've heard a lot of stuff about various properties and emotional arguments and objective, subjective. It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Back in 2011, I spoke to this council about pesticides at the Acadia collection on Encinitas. And here we are again, Dildren. Is it safe? Is it not safe? I invite the council to go ask the people on Clark Avenue and Encinitas and Eolis and Parkwood Place and ask them if they got sick 10 years ago. when the construction, when they flip the dirt. Ask them, please do so. Anyways, I asked the council to deny the applicant appeal because it violates the general plan, Encinitas general plan, in a number of ways. There's 3 right there. Right here. I asked the city to make a firm commitment that they will not make any changes to Clark Avenue. Some of the problems that we've seen today were due to the Shea homes and their pop-out driveways and these harsh curbs. We can do better than that. Just read this stuff, it's great. The data is old. What about the effects on Urania Avenue and Orpheus Avenue from these developments? Nobody's talking about the Piraeus development also is adding in. All these people in the La Maria and La Costa and all these, guess what? They're gonna go to Home Depot. They're gonna go to Walmart. They're gonna drive by these intersections also, increasing, or actually decreasing the level of service. That's the key word, decreasing level of service. Now, this is where we get into some real nice data. They publish data about the number of cars per hour and AM, PM trips. It's torturous logic, as mentioned. Do the math on this. I should get a nice chart. It just doesn't add up, really. I mean, you divide it by 24 hours, and the peak is only twice as much. I mean, how many hours is there 0 cars? The math is bad. If the math's bad there, it's probably bad everywhere else. And what if these numbers are bad? What are our remedies if these numbers are bad? The projections, the experts' projections. What if they're bad? I said adverse. Maybe they define adverse differently in Orange County than they do in Encinitas. I don't know. It's interesting stuff. These peak hours, where are these cars going to go if they're not going on the freeway? On all the rest of the roads, yes. Okay, here's a great chart here showing construction traffic. You should study this. There's so much information here. And if it's not enough, you can go to the original documentation. It's like 500 pages. I mean, look at those peak hours. We're 0 in and 0 out on construction. How can I trust any of the rest of the plans on this? Once again, deny the appeal. Thank you.
Following Lauren Linhoff, Sanjin Samal, Brian Campbell, and then Jennifer Hewitson.
I think I have a couple photos. All right. Dear Encinitas City Council members, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your service and dedication to our beautiful city. All the efforts on our bike trails, widening the freeways, and some walking paths. As a resident of Clark Avenue, where it bottlenecks is our home, I wanted to share my continued concern for the Clark Avenue proposal. I understand you're under pressure from the state, but we have a local traffic issue. It's unsafe to commute in the neighborhoods surrounding our neighborhood. This is Union. There's no safe or well-constructed road to get in and out. This was just this afternoon. I didn't take any measurements, but clearly earlier we had all of the measurements we need. Can you go to the next photo? This is the end. The traffic commissioner had said this is the roundabout to nowhere that the developer's gonna improve. I just don't see, this is a couple hours ago. I don't see what the need for that is. There's not enough width to commute through. And then the last photo. This is this morning, every morning, 8 a.m. We have gridlock. That's the Capri traffic trying to go to the freeway. That's San Marcos, La Costa trying to go to the freeway. And we can't get out of Clark to go to the freeway. It's backed up through the red cars waiting in the middle of the crosswalk. We have a major problem. We have to work together as a city and the developer to make a resolution for this, to make it safe for us to commute through the city. And there's been nothing presented. Thank you for your time and efforts, and thank you to my fellow community for fighting to make this better. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Sanjam Samag. I'm a board-certified orthopedic surgeon. I live on Union Street with my wife, my mini golden doodle, and my 1-year-old. And I serve as a co-chairman of the Division of Orthopedic Surgery at our local hospital, Scripps Memorial Hospital, Encinitas. There's been a lot of talk tonight about subjective and objective. And I think I can say in my practice, objectively, there's been an increase in pedestrians and bicyclists being hit each and every year. And two of the worst traumas that I see that come through the emergency room, where I cover orthopedic trauma call, are bicyclists and pedestrians being struck by vehicles. And these are not small accidents or scrapes. These are bones sticking out of ankles. These are fractured hips where people cannot walk and are wheelchair bound. They come in on stretchers, shattered and bleeding shoulders. Adding 200 units to a location in our community where there are limited to no sidewalks, limited road access, and no throughfare, with the increased traffic will result in injury to our local Encinitas community members. Because of the project's small location behind two small neighborhoods, with no easy way in or out, and is bordered by the freeway, more than any other project proposed, this complex will cause one of our loved ones to be injured or killed. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when someone will end up in our hospital when these units are allowed to be built with the minimal infrastructure that's been proposed. I understand the need for affordable housing in Encinitas, but this location with no pedestrian, bicycle, or car thoroughfare with limited sidewalks will result in further injuries or fatalities to members of our community. Thank you.
Can you pull up, it says number 10A, Clark Apartment.
Following Brian Campbell is Jennifer Hewitson, Cynthia Shea Palmer, and then Ellen Hartman.
All right, hello, Brian Campbell. Thank you for listening, and please do what you can to help other people in the future. We're adding 200 units to the very inside point of an existing, really old neighborhood. Oh, I didn't know that there's a lot of bullets here. We're doubling the number of homes, and we're providing egress through Clark Avenue. It's going to be crazy. I'll show you some pictures that I just got in the morning. I think we're setting ourselves up for litigation. There's pesticides on the property exactly adjacent to this site. And I will just, so right here, these are the sites. That's the Shea Homes development at the end of Clark. We already had to deal with all the traffic. I'm dealing with life-threatening issues. My neighbor, Bonnie, has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Her son has had the police at his house for the past 4 years, a bunch of times, suicide. Jeffrey Lyman, who actually his father owned the property that's shown in orange that is now Shea Homes. He has a brain tumor, just diagnosed with brain tumor. Organophosphates, organochlorines are carcinogens. They are neurotoxins, as you can see my body shaking. I don't have Parkinson's in my family, and I'm getting it at 45, and it's pretty terrifying. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and that's the most terrifying point. If I was just a single man, train tracks, here I come. But I'm not. I got a 5-year-old, I got to live, and I got to do good things. That's why I'm here right now. You know, the city of Encinitas knows that there's organochlorines, there's really dangerous pesticides on the property exactly adjacent to this. The Department of Environmental Health knows as well. These are recorded documents. Your people sent me these after I asked them for them. There's like 4 times the level, up to like 4.5 feet deep. We're talking concentrations 4.5 feet deep under the surface of the earth that were, it would be, let me get to the point. If we don't hold them accountable to the pesticides that are in that property and not have them do an environmental assessment report, would be completely ridiculous and whatever the word is for negligent. There's 40-foot requirements. The road is already red curbed at Clark and Leucadia. It's 27 feet. I'm running out of time. This is like 2 days ago. Look at, this is the backed up. I've got the green light. I'm sitting there waiting. And if you look in the upper right, I let her get all the way to the other side, the mom that's multitasking with the dog and her babies, and then I drive past and show the line. And northbound, or eastbound and westbound is the same. Here's a view, people going eastbound, the Capri. And the point is, this morning, I just took these pictures, getting my daughter from Capri. There's a lot of kids that go. The upper right was the first group that I passed, and then when
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
the fire department's a quarter mile from this site.
Hello again, Jennifer Hewitson, Wotan Drive. The Clark Street project may not be in my neighborhood, but it is in my community and affects my city. Pueblo was one of many rural roads when I used to ride horses as a kid. I know those days are long gone. But I also know that even when housing is needed, even a by right project does not give anyone the right to abuse existing neighborhoods without consideration for quality of life. Shoving a 199-unit apartment complex into a quiet old neighborhood with narrow roads and no direct access to a major street is dangerous. To this point, I need to quote Mr. Ardolino from the Planning Commission meeting. He readily admitted at the Planning Commission meeting last month, I quote, "We understand Union is difficult. It's an impacted street. The circulation is awful." Those are his words. "We get it. It's probably way too many trips to put down one street. But we also have a traffic analysis that says it's entirely safe. Because it does not trigger any sort of actually mitigable effect, because that's our access." End quote. But he also did say, short of a freeway off-ramp directly into their complex, Union is our access. And maybe they do need a freeway off-ramp into their complex. So there it is. He knows it is awful. They know it is awful. We all know it is awful, impacted, dangerous, but they have paid for a study that says otherwise. Are you really willing to approve this project as is, knowing the awful, dangerous, impacted situation on that road and in that neighborhood? Your decision sends a message. If developers get away with inadequate parking, misleading reports, claiming needs for endless waivers, regardless of how damaging they are to communities, this reverberates, and the next project gets away with even less consideration for our city's health, safety, and livability. We all have seen the terrible results of density in other cities and must demand better. Despite the state's unreasonable laws, mandating our destruction. Please require reduction of mass and numbers, ample parking, improvements on surrounding streets for safety, and more open space and trees would be nice as well. Encinitas can change the trajectory of this density bomb. Projects must be much better if Encinitas decides they must be. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Cynthia Shea Palmer, and I live on Del Riego Avenue in Tortilla Flats. I'm also here to express my frustration and concern about the Clark apartments. This project is the only project of all the housing element sites that does not have a main artery. It is plunked into the back of an 80-year-old neighborhood, in an underserved 80-year-old neighborhood without any investment in infrastructure and crammed against the freeway. Sidewalks are minimal, and it's a clear safety and health concern. While the Clark Traffic Study concludes the project traffic will not create a substantial traffic effect and no off-site roadway improvements are required, The Traffic, Mobility, and Safety Commission collaboratively agreed with a written recommendation that the site should be modified. They saw the problem. They wrote a letter. There were several other recommendations that I can't, I don't have enough time to talk through here. One I will say is to keep the Puebla barrier. But they saw the health safety issues with the development. We've seen no response from that letter, even though there was a request for outreach to the community. It's been radio silent. We're not opposed to change. And I was living in our house when the Lucadia Boulevard went through, and that's when the Puebla barrier went in, because at that time, in 2000, people were getting impatient at the light and zooming through the neighborhood, and the city council at that time put up the Puebla barrier. If that barrier comes out with the way traffic is today, it's going to be insane, especially with the roads the way they are. That's outside the developer's authority, so that's a direct request to you. On parking, Amy talked about it a little bit. We have a parking problem now because of the proliferation of ADUs. I mean, great friends with my neighbors, but they're parking in front of my place, even though they're like 10 houses down, because they have no room. So we know the properties were recently sold. The developer has a lot of skin in the game, but we, the residents, we have all the skin in the game, and we have no power, it seems, or say in what happens to this 80-year-old community. So ultimately, our future is in your hands, and the magnitude of this development will destroy our community, and there's a lot of risk to safety and health. So I implore you to do the right thing, and that is to, represent our community. So I ask the City Council, deny this project. Let's look at it again and really reduce the density for what the community can handle. Thank you.
Next speakers, Ellen Hartman, Patricia Escobedo, and then Sylvia Pizzoli.
I love going through with all these people who have written down these wonderful things to say, but I just took my notes as I was listening to the developer. If we are going on erroneous definitions of what roads are, to me that would be the only possibility to choose how to proceed. The developer has refused to talk to the neighbors in a way that the Planning Commission had suggested that we all get together and make a plan for this road on Union Street. I live on Union Street for 41 years. It's only 14 residences. So even though we have a wonderful dog training place down the street, and from 8 to 9 every morning, there's 20 cars going one way, and then 20 cars going the other way, and then from 11:30 they come back and pick up the dogs, and then go back the other way, and at 12 noon, the next group comes, 20 cars go one day, drop off their dogs and go out again, and then at 4:30 they come back, 20 cars, and come back and pick up their dogs and go back the other way. So that wasn't happening during COVID. And that's when the study was done, during COVID. So everybody was locked down, and I think that's a really erroneous traffic thing. At any rate, I would be the first person, if there were 50 or 100 at the most units down the street, I would be out there digging a hole for the foundation, if I thought it was safe. Maybe I should take that back. But to have 200 units on a street that has 14 residences and it barely supports that, the dog park, the dog overnight place, the agricultural place, I mean, I agree. There's just not going to be any way that that street's going to hold up. It just won't. So I really ask you not to be bullied, to use your judgment, subjective and objective, because it is a human issue. Please look at this from a compassionate point of view and your responsibility. And you said you would serve this community, not Orange County. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Patricia Escobedo, followed by Sylvia Pizzoli, and then Angela Scheibe. What's your name? Okay, you just get the 3 minutes. We don't have any time donation.
Good evening, Mayor Blakespear and City Council members. Many of you have seen our faces many, many times. We're here, and we've been coming here since 2018. I represent the Latino community in the Clark development, which we lovingly know as Avocado Acres, Tortilla Flats. We are here to appeal to you. Anyone who travels through our community can see our streets cannot sustain the increased traffic from this overburdening development. Western National will tell you otherwise. They are here to say it's a great place to put 199 units. The roads are fine. The increased traffic will not impact anyone. They will have enough parking set aside, is what they're saying. And our rebuttal is no, no, no. Western National is here to make money, nothing more, nothing less. Our bottom line is to retain our neighborhood safety. That is our number one. They are also blamed you, the city of Encinitas, for their lack of outreach in Spanish to our community. They said that you had no requirements to communicate in a language understandable to the residents that it would impact. But they did not need permission from you, the city of Encinitas. They needed to do the right thing. They knew that we were Spanish-speaking community because 3 of the residents that sold to their by right needed Spanish translators. So they knew we were there, and they didn't reach out to us. I have 17 letters here that I have from my community in Spanish expressing their concerns that couldn't be here tonight, but some of our elderly residents did come. They made it out here to let you know how important it is for you to consider the safety, that they will not be able to walk anymore safely. My father has a cane, and so does my friend's mother, and they're not going to feel safe. I would not have them, be out in the streets anymore because of the increased traffic. We talked, Marco Gonzalez talked about objective standards. Well, do any of you have the problem of driving down your street and having to wait and move aside while oncoming traffic has to pass through? Because we do. That's what we do every single day on any one of those streets. Why? Because we have so many ADUs and rentals that help and contribute to your low-income numbers. We are a workhorse for you, and we don't have enough parking for everybody. We're barely managing with what we have. So this development does not have enough parking because families are not going to want to be by the freeway when they can go be by Sunshine Gardens or your other development that's not by the freeway. We're going to have the 2 and 3 bedrooms are going to be roommates. There's going to be 3 to 4 cars in the 2 bedrooms, up to 5 in the larger ones. So we really can't afford to lose our parking. It is an issue. And so please, they don't have enough parking for everybody. So thank you. Please consider the safety of our neighborhood. It really is not like they're presenting it. Thank you so much.
Next speaker is Angela Scheibe, followed by Jean Chapo, and then Dennis Caden.
Good evening, fellow members and member of the council. I am coming here. I just wanted to say that I'm humbled with the way our community expressed themselves with all the problems that we are facing right now. I have my own communication problems, and I'm not represented by the Hispanic community here. My language is Portuguese. I'm from Brazil. And I'd like to just convey to you just one topic, just because everything else seemed to have been mentioned here. And this one has too, but I'm focusing on this one, which is regarding traffic. I am a resident of Del Rio Avenue, which is in the Flats, and corner with Puebla. So we are very, very concerned about traffic, not only for the existing, not only for after construction, but also during construction. It's going to be a lot of very heavy equipment traveling in those very, very light streets with no sidewalks and lots of kids and dogs and elderlies, me included. Also am concerned about the traffic after the project is completed because the parking ratios are already lower because the government, the state is allowing lower parking ratios. And so there's going to be a lot of street parking on Puebla and Clark and Union. The project also is very out of scale compared to our community of one level or a maximum 2-level houses and single families. And now it's going to be like 3-story high with all this density. That was something very brutal for our community. Also, I would like to also say that we don't know how we're going to be handling all these children that is going to be coming into the development too, because our schools don't have capacity. They already are above capacity as they are Capri and Paul Ecke. And I think that the problem with this community is that it's sitting by the freeway. It's very amazing because it's sitting there, you say, oh, it's accessible. It's by the freeway and it's by the train station, but there's no access. There's no access. This is a reality. This project has no access. So I'd like to ask you to consider not to allow this. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Jean Chapo, followed by Dennis Caden, and then Sherry Almendarez.
Good evening. Planning Commission had a heck of a time with this project, and as you can see by their findings, they were trying to hang their hat on something because they saw there were a lot of loose ends and a lot of things that weren't solved about the project. It wasn't until that evening that most of the people in attendance learned that Union Street was going to be both the egress, both the entrance and the exit for the project, and that Clark Street was going to be the exit only. So if you take rough numbers and say 100% of the people coming into the project are coming down Union Street, 50% of those in the project are leaving down Union Street, 50% are leaving on Clark. What it means is Union Street truly has an enormous impact. I'd point to the fact at the Planning Commission meeting, the developer made the statement that, oh, we all, from the very beginning, we thought Union Street was going to be the major entrance and major exit for the project, and yet they named the project the Clark Street Apartments. It should have been the Union Street Apartments if that was true. I think the Planning Commission found that their finding about the 4-lot boundary adjustment and the requirement that it might be a subdivision and therefore requiring an EIR was because they didn't know how to solve all the problems, and they were presented with an unfinished and uncooked project. And they were just trying to hang their head on something so that at some point or another they could come back and solve these problems. They are truly public safety impacts, and I think that the intersection of Union Street and Saxony is an enormous public safety impact and needs to be solved. With the 14, 15 houses that are on Union Street right now, not very many granted, it's of great difficulty to get onto Saxony from Union Street because we have the pulsing of the lights both at Encinitas Boulevard and Leucadia Boulevard, letting people onto Saxony, so they're coming one direction or the other. Most difficult, and sometimes you're lined up there 3, 4 deep, waiting for your opportunity. I haven't heard anybody say anything about the size of the project or the fact that we have 40 affordable units in the project. These are all very good things, and I'm not afraid of that at all. I think it's a good thing. I will say one thing, though. This site, of the 15 sites that you selected, has to be the worst. If you have a site that is smashed up against the freeway, and thank goodness David Meyer was kind enough to bring it to us, that has only access from one end and egress from both ends, what a pathetic site that is. And then to jam 200 units on it, I just think that it creates a number of problems, and we owe it to ourselves and you owe it to us, regardless of whatever the studies are, to help us solve these problems before you approve this project. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Dennis Caden, I live in Encinitas, for at least 10 minutes. I want to quote St. Augustine. He says, right is right, even if no one is doing it. Wrong is wrong, even if everyone is doing it. This project is wrong. Mayor Blakespear, after the selection period was over on your sites, you came to council and asked staff if Clark could be removed because after you made your decision, you said you drove through, I finally drove through the community, and you know what? It really doesn't fit there. And that's on public record. So here's your chance to fix the project that doesn't work. There's other ones that probably will not work. There's some that are pretty good. But one thing, staff responded here to circulation element policy 1.3. And that's good. But they missed policy 2.3, which says design the circulation system in new developments in such a way to minimize through traffic in all residential neighborhoods. And then policy 2.4, which for everybody in Encinitas is trying to be taken out of the mobility element or the circulation element, so your neighborhood is no longer protected. It's policy 2.4, when considering circulation patterns and standards, primary consideration will be given to the reservation of character and safety of existing residential neighborhoods. Here's the key. The founders knew what was going on when we incorporated, and then they added, where conflicts arise between convenience of motorists and neighborhood safety, community character preservation, the latter will have first priority. So everyone here is asking you to enforce the policy that you swore when you got elected and sworn to office to preserve. You're not preserving community character in our city. Not all these R30s are fitting. So reverse it, fix it, admit a mistake. That's leadership. Thank you.
Next speakers, Sherry Armendariz, Dana Pierce, and then Craig Campion.
Good evening. I realize we're really late. Lots of people are tired. This is probably the last place I want to be, and I know I really respect everything that all you do in the council and the mayor and the attorneys and everyone involved. I mean, I know you've done a lot. I know that the apartment complex developer has put a lot of money and time into this, and you've got lots to think about, and you may have already made up your minds. But my letter didn't get in until Monday. I don't even know if you've read it. The one thing that my name is Sherry Armendariz, by the way, I'm sorry. We've lived on Union Street only 16 years. That's not very long compared to a lot of our neighbors. A lot of our neighbors have been there and seen all the changes. And we're all open to changes. I mean, that's just life. But I'm feeling very, very claustrophobic. I mean, seriously claustrophobic. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think to myself, I have a 90-year-old neighbor on the corner of Saxony and Union that backs out of her driveway. She can't drive out of her driveway. And I think to myself, how is she gonna get out? And I think to myself, my husband and I walk our two little dogs. How are we gonna do that? There's no other way out of our house. And I wanna know how many of the people here today were here in 2008 when we had the fires. And we were on the next to be evacuated. We had just moved here. My husband is at work, and I packed everything into our vehicle, and I had my dog and my cat, and I didn't know where we were going to go. I had no idea how we were going to get out and where we were going to go. And now we're expecting 200 to 500 more bodies. That's bikers, walkers, people driving their cars. That number is inconceivable to me. I don't understand how anybody can have put this particular property on the 15 choices. And it wasn't there. I'm not really involved in all this over these years, but I do want more affordable housing. I want people to be able to live here, but not at the expense of anyone getting hurt and having to go to Scripps Hospital. It could be me. It could be my neighbors. We have elderly neighbors, a lot of them. And I'm so emotional because I just can't believe we got this far. And I'm sorry for the builder, but I know you have a difficult, this is an appeal. If I was in your position, I would listen to my planning commission. I think they are wonderful, smart, experienced people. And they listened to us, and they took all the facts, and they said this particular place is wrong, and it's too dense, and it's a dangerous place. So whatever little reason, lawyer-wise or attorney-wise, we're gonna have the attorneys arguing, you have the right today to change your minds. If you've already said you're gonna, in your mind, you're gonna approve this, you can do the right thing and not approve it. We have lots of other places that we can put affordable housing to meet the state mandate. Let's work on it and do it, okay? Not this place. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, City Council. My name is Dana Pierce, 607 Orpheus Avenue, on the opposite side of the freeway from the Clark Avenue projects. I've been here for probably 30 years, maybe 40 years. I've seen a lot of projects go in, and I've seen a lot of bad projects, and I've seen a lot of good projects. And I'll say right now, I think this is probably one of the best city councils we've had in my 40 years in Encinitas. We've seen a huge amount of influx of people wanting to live here, and this being the jewel, everybody wants to live here. I used to be next door neighbor to Herman Booman back when there were four-way stop signs out at Rancho Santa Fe and Encinitas. So I've been around, I've seen a lot of stuff going on. I think this is a bad project. I really do. Last time I was here, I think Rob Blau was still on staff with Traffic Commission. He wasn't even the head of Traffic Commission, and I'm the person that really walked the effort to get the speed bumps on Orpheus Avenue. And that's really helped our community as far as pedestrian safety and access. That was before anybody even knew what a speed bump was. I had to go to the federal government and get the national standards from them. City of Encinitas didn't know what a speed bump was. And we fought for 2 years against the sheriff's department and the fire department because they were so worried that their equipment was going to be damaged going over speed bumps. Anyway, yeah, this is not a good project, jamming 200 apartments into single access. I just try to imagine what these folks are going to be dealing with 400. If there's 200 units, then there's 400 cars, and those people are going to be going in and out of Union Street 2 to 3 times a day, and that's crazy. That's just going to be a parking lot on Union Street from one end to the other. And the people on Clark and Del Rio and all of those little streets in there. I saw the project go in at Fulvia and Hymettus, and that was a boondoggle. The houses were beautiful. They're selling for 400, what is it, 4 million now? 4 million plus. All the people that bought there put in ADUs, sandwiched them in, but there's no pedestrian access. It's all pop-outs for cars and bioswales right up to the curb. Anybody that walks on that street around that project walks in the street. Then I would like to also say that Channel 1 is a wonderful project. Bioswales are up against the house. There's beautiful, broad DG walking paths for everybody to incorporate on. I could see something like this going in with 100 units and put in Channel 1 sidewalks and DG walking paths.
Thank you, Dana. I'm sorry your time is up. It does go fast.
Craig Campion?
Craig Campion, Poinsettia Park. I support CDAG's option B. Deny the current Clark Avenue plan, or Union Avenue plan, unless the project is downsized and concerns are mitigated. From Poinsettia Park's viewpoint, the waivers of setback should be denied. The project still has to meet city standards. It doesn't have to be a safety or health issue if it affects surrounding neighborhoods. Subjective or objective? We have to approve the project to hit our housing numbers. Subjective or objective? We have to appease David, Ecke, Myers, and Marco because they hold the power in our city. Subjective or objective? We have to follow the guidelines as set by the Cuckoo Caucus of our party in order to be elected. Subjective or objective? I brought my Democratic Party mailer with me. My one surprise is that Rob Bonta didn't endorse the mayor's campaign, with a caveat that all residents or city council members who oppose this project or voted against the housing plan in the 2080 election will be subject to a state lawsuit. However, I was heartened when I read my mailer and then saw the TV ads while I was watching my weekend football games. Always standing up for us. So I thought the mayor is finally believing in our community and standing up for us, which is the residents of Encinitas. So I felt good until I went to sleep that night and woke up, and sometimes you get the dreams, I forget what they call subconscious, thoughts, and it occurred to me maybe us wasn't citizens of Encinitas. It was the real estate and development industry and their PAC money. Well, I guess we'll find out tonight if standing up for us is actually people in Encinitas or the people with power. Thanks.
That does conclude public speakers, and then I do have 5 individuals who registered opposition to the project but do not wish to speak. If any of you do want to speak, please let me know now. Christy D., Natalie Satoon, Karen Caden, Irma Mendez, and Art Armendariz.
Okay, thank you. So next we have the rebuttal by the non-applicant appellant. So that is Clark Development Action Group. You go first. And you have 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mayor, City Council members. The starting point and the ending point, unfortunately, is the state laws. We know you're bound by it, but we need to be cognizant of what the Planning Commission thought and said about it, and then what is by right development. By right development says a couple things. One, it's CEQA exempt, and 2, you can also, and you should, consider public health and safety measures and standards. It's in the code. So it provides you 2 bases. But from the CEQA perspective, the Planning Commission got it right because there's a subdivision question here. It's 6 lots. It's the way that the applicant made its application for the boundary adjustment involving 6 parcels. And it's the manner that the lots and the number of lots involved that make it not qualify for the city's boundary adjustment. And it's therefore falls under the Subdivision Map Act. That takes it out of CEQA, so it's no longer, it's a discretionary decision for the subdivision and matter, and therefore you can consider these other impacts and should go back and be studied. But it should go back and be studied for other reasons too. So, and we presented that here today, and it's the road, it's the access. It's a public health and safety standard and consideration. And it's one that the developer, the applicant, is required to take care of. Condition the project so it's not an adverse public health and safety standard. And how do we know that? Because we know it's an under capacity road based upon the type of road it is. The flaw that occurred here was that, and I showed you the slide earlier, the city couldn't find a designation in its community plan for the road, so it went to a county standard and said, well, we're just going to deem it to be the residential collector. It was arbitrary and capricious that we're just going to use that. The applicant rode that storm at a 4,500 ADT capacity, and it's not. We know it's not. It's not that width. These cars won't fit. Pedestrians, cyclists, and automobile, it's going to be a disaster. So on that objective road classification standard and lack of capacity and the health and safety standards, the basis for the denial. That's why the project is so problematic, but that's why we appealed. Planning Commission was looking for the basis of what's wrong with this project, and the arguments that were made at Planning Commission was, well, the road's problem, but it's not the developer's issue, it's the city's issue. It is the developer's issue. That's why you condition these projects that there aren't public and health and safety impacts. Otherwise, the city 5 years from now is going to be saying, we don't have money for the roundabouts. We don't have money for the traffic signal. But now's the time to properly design it and condition it. So that's the CEQA nexus. It's the environmental nexus. I mentioned the subdivision. These remnant lots for which the waivers are being requested for, well, the setbacks going through buildings, those are our remnant lots. Well, those lots individually have to qualify, as I said, for the R30 zone. So those remnant lots don't meet the city's own ordinance for a boundary adjustment because the resulting lots have to fit within the zoning. So on its face, you got the subdivision problems and it doesn't meet the city standards for the boundary adjustment, and it involves 6 lots. And then the last point also relates to the health and safety conditions and standards. The other basis to deny the project was the health considerations of the cancer risk, which is an objective standard. But the more prescient and an obvious one is the road, the capacity to design. And the Planning Commission offered and recognized the need to go back and revisit this, work with the community. How can we make this road work? And there was unwillingness to do so. And what did you hear tonight? You heard, well, you know how we're going to deal with it? We're going to red stripe 450 feet of it. It's just going to make it worse. So it's not addressing, it's a very backwards way of planning, to say the least, that the only offered fix is to red stripe more of it, which is just going to eviscerate the community. So it recognizes the big void in the way this project was reviewed for its road capacity, and the health and safety issues with regards to its access are pretty obvious. So on that basis, we'd ask that you grant our appeal, make the finding that's necessary under the government code to deny the project, let it go back to the drawing board, and fix those problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have the rebuttal by the applicant, and you have 7 minutes.
Because we're the applicant.
It's because he's the appellant and the applicant. So if he was to have double, because he's also the appellant and the applicant, he would have 10 minutes, but it's actually just 7 minutes.
Marco Gonzalez on behalf of the applicant and appellant. I want to address the cancer risk issue because I think this kind of goes to the heart of how these appeals are approached by CDAG, or how their issues are approached. When you get into the detail of their experts' analysis on the cancer risk, here's what they said. As an aspect of project design, you developer, you have said that you're going to use these clean machines when you construct your project, these Tier 4 emission standards machines. You said you're going to do that, and then you dig down into the evidence, it says that you consulted with your contractors, and they said, yeah, we're going to use it because all the equipment made since 2015 basically qualifies as Tier 4, and therefore we're allowed to put those emission standards into our model. What CDAG did in their expert analysis is they said, it's not a mitigation measure, and it's not a condition of approval. Therefore, we have no way of knowing whether they're lying to us about the equipment that they're going to use. And so we're going to presume that they're not going to use that clean equipment. They're going to use the dirtiest equipment. And if we extrapolate that all the way through the model, what we get is a 27 times cancer risk. It's not based on reality. It's not based on the type of equipment that's typically used. It's a straw man argument that they set up so that they can come around and say, it's going to be a cancer risk. And then they bolster it with community input that the Shea Home site used all of these really bad chemicals. What you didn't see was evidence that what they did on the Shea site historically was drastically different agriculturally from what was done on this site. There's a reason why they don't put up all of the bad chemicals that were used on our site, because they never were. This notion of a cancer risk as a result of construction is fully fabricated by their experts on this idea that we're not going to use clean equipment. It's absurd. It's an absurd argument. We detailed it in our letters, and the fact that they try to rely on it now on appeal just condition us to use the equipment that we said we're going to use, and that issue's gone. All right, so let's get the hyperbole out of the discussion. We can come back to talking about traffic, but again, I want to point out a couple things. One, when Mr. Sherman got up, a lot of the stuff that he put up on the screen was nowhere in his appeal. His appeal was required to put every piece of evidence that he brought up before the Planning Commission, and instead he put up a bunch of stuff about road standards that we've never seen until tonight. But what we do know is that he's conflated two very important things with respect to the standards that apply here. He talks about the general plan policy 1.2, which is a policy that addresses segments. And policy 1.2 says that your segments should endeavor to be a level of service C. Well, that endeavor language is not an objective word. It is, you should try really hard to be C. It doesn't mandate it, therefore it doesn't apply under the Housing Accountability Act. However, 1.3 says intersections can't go to E or F as a result of the project. I've seen no data up on that screen from either their traffic report, from Mr. Sherman, from any person in the community telling me that this went from D to E or E to F as a result of the traffic that will result from these 200 units. That is the legal obligation. Now, look, I get the emotionality that comes with change. And I get the fact that people look at their streets right now and say, you know what, it could be better. And frankly, consider the picture that was put up there of Union Street looking down, the one that shows the big tree growing out over the street. That's a problem. Somebody is not making somebody who owns that tree cut it back. We'll cut it back voluntarily. But part of the problem is that when people don't follow the rules with respect to where they're allowed to park, when people don't follow the rules in terms of the where they leave their trash cans, where they put various things, their mailboxes and their trash enclosures out in front of their homes on Union Street, all of that works to further constrict what is already, yes, not a fully improved street. But as we know in Encinitas, and I'm sure your staff can attest to this, throughout our city, what we have are people who say, I love my rural street. I love the fact that I don't have sidewalks. I love the fact that it feels like old Encinitas. And as soon as you show up and say, okay, we're going to build a sidewalk, curbs, and gutters, they say, oh, wait, no way, no how. Because they know that also means that we're going to accommodate the density that the zoning would allow on these parcels. So we have this problem, and really the problem is a 2018 problem. The problem as events tonight is that you guys shouldn't have zoned this. right? That's basically what you've heard, is that we don't like the zoning that you placed on this. We don't like the fact that the state made you do it. We don't like the fact that you inherited a city that didn't have a compliant housing element for years and years. But the fact is, the time to challenge on community character for a by right project was 2018. The time to challenge today is on objective standards. And they're not doing that. No one is doing that because they can't do that. There's a reason why the government code, the municipal code, HCD, the applicant, all of us agree that the public health and safety standards are not violated, but the anecdotal community character impacts of bringing traffic here is going to be problematic for the existing residents. I'm sorry, legally, you don't have the discretion to put that on the developer. Now, you've been asked to ignore the law, ignore CEQA, turn this project down. You've basically been asked to buy the property from the developer with public taxpayer dollars because they inappropriately relied on the zoning that was put on this property in 2018. That's not a good way to govern. Zoning standards are in place for a reason. The reasonable reliance on those is what was contemplated at the time that the housing element update was approved. It's what's contemplated by HCD when they write the multiple letters basically excoriating the staff for failing to make the objective standards, legal standard, a big enough issue. This is the fourth time that they've had to put the city on notice of this. The fact is, we will improve the roads after construction. We will resurface them. We will put them out to their appropriate width. We will cut back landscaping if we're asked to. We will pay for traffic humps to go in to slow down traffic. We will pay to put in a stop sign if it's warranted. But on the numbers before you today, on the data that's been presented to you, on the objective data that you have to rely on by law, you don't have the wherewithal, legally or factually, to claim that there's a public health and safety problem here and to impose either a reduction in density or a denial on this project. Our consultants are available to discuss any of these issues with you, and I hope that you would speak with staff on these traffic issues, because we've been talking to them for 2 years and we think we've done what we're supposed to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I will go ahead and close the public hearing. So it's now closed, and now we will have council discussion and action. So I'll go ahead and speak first, because I see my colleagues are not rushing to put their name in the queue. I'll just say that I know that it's extremely difficult, and I'll express, I think, something that I'm sure we're all feeling, which is it's extremely difficult to hear the true anguish that all of the public speakers expressed, and to be in the position of needing to apply the law as it sits on the city, so the responsibilities of the city to a project like this. And you know, there are some housing projects where the developer does more work to build community support by working with the community and by encouraging pro-housing voices to come, and by trying to make changes so that there would be some acceptance and some even enthusiasm. You know, I do encourage that. I don't know you, but to the extent you have more projects in this city or other cities, it is a good thing to do. I think the projects turn out better, and it's also easier for the decision makers to be able to hear a diversity of voices. And I recognize that everybody who came tonight to speak is opposed to the project. The reality, though, is that the city of Encinitas, I think it's important to describe a little bit of the history. And I know some of you know this, but some of you probably don't, that the city did not have a state compliant housing plan for basically the entirety of us being a city. And the result of that was a series of lawsuits and lack of compliance with what it's basically regulatory pressure. And so when we went through the process of putting together a plan, we took something to the voters, and that plan actually provided for housing on top of commercial uses, like the Sprouts Market and some of the businesses on El Camino Real in our downtown. And unfortunately, the voters rejected it. You know, the idea of having mixed use in the city, there's a very strong desire not to have more housing in the city, and so the voters rejected that plan, and then there was another plan and the voters rejected it. And so when the council came to having a court order put on to us to adopt a plan, this was one of the sites that among 15 that was chosen. And ultimately, when this site is on the housing element update and it is a by right development, as long as the developer meets the standards, the council doesn't have the discretion to say no to it. And I know the Planning Commission suggested that you can vote your heart, but that really is not the case. I mean, it is not voting your heart and that's something that was said at the Planning Commission. Some of you probably remember that. That is not an objective standard. That is sort of the definition of a personal or subjective standard. And so the reality of looking at this project is that I don't feel that we are able to make a decision that says no to this project. So I think it is the case that congestion is not a public health and safety issue, and that we need to approve this project. So when it comes to that time, I want to make sure and hear from my colleagues, but I will be voting to support this project and support the staff recommendation. And I also just want to say that I do think it's a responsibility, as several of you have said it tonight, that you believe in affordable housing. You know, every project that we have, there are voices that say they don't want that project, but they believe in affordable housing. And in many ways, the reality of saying every community needs to do its part to provide more housing is that we have to find places to put it in the city, despite the fact that there's no part of the city that wants it. So, you know, the 15 sites that are on the housing element are the ones that will have housing on them, and this is one of those. So it continues to be a difficult process from the very beginning of getting a compliant housing plan, and this is yet another decision that is difficult, but it's one that I think is the responsible one and also the legal one to make tonight. So let me take a look here to see. I will call on Councilmember Crayons.
Thank you. And yes, I know that obviously this has been quite the controversy for 8 or 9 years, this housing element process, and certainly the selection of these 15 sites, and particularly this one, has been very difficult. But one part of the history that I wanted to go back to, frankly, is the 60s. And you know, I grew up on Ocean View Avenue on the other side, on the west side of the freeway, and spent a lot of time playing on Union Street on the west side of the freeway, and on Pueblo Street on the west side of the freeway. And frankly, you know, when you look at the way the Interstate 5 created the divide between the west side and east side, and look at the impacts that the freeway has now, and look at the photographs of Leucadia Boulevard traffic that is backed up to Urania and Clark Avenue, and you start to realize just what a significant impact on quality of life that freeway is for us. And it is extremely frustrating to have the automobile be such a determinant in terms of quality of life in our community. And obviously it's not just our community, it's the world. It's our country, it's our state, it's greenhouse gases, it's you know, brake dust, it's rubber, it's just noise, constant noise, and it's pretty frustrating. So I get the anxiety that this notion of adding more cars to the neighborhood is going to cause. But the reality is we have a housing crisis, and the need for housing, and in particular affordable housing, is critical. So we're going to end up with some units out of this particular project that are going to be very important to 200 families. And so when you hear the doctor talk about the dangers of Union Street traffic and recognize that the ability to get much faster than 20 miles an hour on that street or Clark is you know, that's a challenge. That's really working to get going that fast. And you know, these will be your neighbors that will be living there. And so, you know, the notion that they're going to wreak havoc on the people that live on Union and Clark, I think is misplaced. So the I've made some notes here, and one of the things that I wanted to say is that the Puebla barricade is not anything that I have any intention of asking to be removed. I know that it was put in actually before Leucadia Boulevard went through. It was, because I used to travel to Home Depot and cut through your neighborhood, and then it wasn't available to cut through anymore. So, but one way or the other, whether it was before or after Leucadia Boulevard went through, it made a significant difference in terms of the traffic in that neighborhood. And I don't want to change that. If the neighborhood doesn't want that changed, I'm okay, because I do know from living on Hygeia that cut-through traffic is a nightmare. I live with that nightmare every day. And so I'm not interested in creating that same scenario for the folks that live in Tortilla Flats. But I do think that we need to make that barricade bikeable. And right now it is not, because I've tried to bike through there and it's a pain to get around. You can't get through the middle of it. It's not wide enough in the middle. So making it wide enough to ride a bike through the middle, I think, is important. I also know that there's bus stops on Saxony right at Puebla. And that's going to be an important feature of this particular project. There's actually transit available nearby for this project. There will be residents of this project that will have bicycles that have surfboard racks on them. And they will be riding either to D Street via Encinitas Boulevard or Beacons via Leucadia Boulevard. Or maybe they're going to use the new undercrossing to get to Stone Steps. There will be tenants of these apartments that take advantage of their proximity to the ocean. Look, this city was founded on the notion of single family only. There was a desire to keep multifamily housing out of this city. And HCD has been fighting with the city ever since. And because of litigation, lawsuits, we lost. We ended up with multifamily projects, and I know they're painful for these established neighborhoods, but in the end, the notion of trying to litigate continuously is just not good for the city overall. And I'm afraid this is a project that, I respect Mr. Sherman's legal background, but quite frankly, the interpretations of the law don't really, make the notion of trying to defend the Planning Commission's decision something that is in the best interests of our city, especially given the high degree of likelihood that we would be beat in court. And ultimately, I think that it is true that the city and this council has an obligation to the residents of this neighborhood, and specifically the residents of Union Street, to address the roadway that is Union, as well as the intersection of Union and Saxony. And we don't know exactly what shape that's going to take, but I think we need to make a commitment to do the necessary improvements that will make it safe to get out, to travel north on Saxony from Union Street. And it's whether it's an all-way stop, a traffic signal, or a roundabout, we need to get into that project and make sure that we advance it in a timely fashion so that we can have that in place when they have their certificate of occupancy for this project. I would like to ask staff to address the issue of roadway definition. And Mr. Sherman put up some displays that suggested that this staff analysis of these roadways was wrong. And maybe you could speak to that, please.
Thank you, Council Member Krantz, Royce Powell, Director of Development Services. The data that was presented by Mr. Sherman tonight, those are not city standards. Those are the County of San Diego standards, so therefore they're not applicable to this project. We do have our city traffic engineer here to address the capacity issue raised, as well as public or the road standards issues, but I just wanted to clarify that the data that was presented tonight is not applicable because they're not city standards.
All right. Can we get the condition that the developer agreed to with regard to the Tier 4 equipment into this approval?
Yes, if you want to include that as part of the motion and the applicant's agreeable to that, then certainly.
Okay. Yeah, this is a project that, there'll be teachers at various schools around the community that will be able to live in this project. This will be workforce housing for our new employer downtown, Flock Freight. Scripps Hospital has a ton of employees that will be able to take advantage of this project. It is, a walkable project for Scripps Hospital, cutting through the open space to get to Requesa from Saxony is a viable alternative. I recognize the impacts that it's going to have on the neighborhood, and I'm committed to doing everything that we need to do to mitigate to the best of our ability. I frankly am very frustrated that we will be burying high voltage lines through this project, but we're not going to do that on Clark. But there's a lot of question about, even if we were to bury the power lines on Clark, whether that's what the neighborhood wants. Some of what I'm hearing is that you don't want that street widened. So, it's a big question mark hanging over. So in the meantime, this project, obviously we couldn't condition this project on undergrounding the utilities on Clark to the extent that I thought we should. But in the meantime, I think that this is one of those projects that we need to do what is in the best interest of the city as a whole.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Deputy Mayor Moscow.
So I want to start off in saying that I do appreciate the feedback and public input that we've gotten over the last several years, because the conversation obviously didn't start with the application being filed on this project, but it started way back when we started talking about complying with state law, housing element law, and coming up with our plan. And that plan was hotly debated. This room was completely full every time we discussed that, and you're shaking your head. You remember those discussions of where we're going to put the density and how we're going to comply with state law. And not all of the parcels were perfect, and some were better than others. But finally we put a plan together that made the most amount of sense and that we all agreed to. And that's the plan that we have before us. And this project was filed consistent with that plan that we put together, whereby we would basically comply with state housing law, and that we would do our part regionally, statewide, to meet the need for more affordable housing in our area. Because all big problems like this can be solved with local action. And so doing something about affordable housing was something that we needed to do. And so with this plan of 15 sites, we actually are doing something about it. And you've heard some of my colleagues talk about the fact that this is actually going to help a lot of folks that need affordable housing in our city. And you're already starting to see that materialize. This project and the projects that come consistent with that plan are not without impacts, especially as we've seen a lot of the roads designed for single-family homes. So it's incumbent upon our city, for all of us, to come together and ensure that we're working together to make sure we're coming up with a plan to enhance our roadways, make them as safe as possible. You heard today people talking about Quail Gardens Drive, Saxony, Rancho Santa Fe is something that we're constantly talking about, Encinitas Boulevard, Willow Spring. All of the roads are at capacity. El Camino Real, which we're talking about right now. How do we make all of these roads as safe as possible for people that want to walk, ride, roll, do whatever they need to do to get to where they need to get, and decrease traffic congestion at the same time? I think that is the real issue for us, is to look at that and decide how can we deal with that, and how can we come up with a plan that makes sense. and how can we focus our resources and our abilities to be able to fund those projects in the future. I think that's really going to be the thing that we need to focus on in the future to ensure that we continue to have a high quality of life in the city, and that it's safe for our families to be able to walk around our city. And so what I've heard tonight is essentially a project that is consistent with our housing element that we approved, consistent with state law. I haven't heard anything from the opposing council, and I've listened very carefully, that is different than what has already been said, and has produced evidence for contrary evidence that's already in the record. So it's really hard to find. I don't really find that there's a basis to find it as opposed to this project. Again, it's completely consistent with our housing element and consistent with state law. But I think the overall thing is, again, that we need to focus on how do we basically move from a city that was primarily a single-family kind of residential dwelling units to having more multifamily projects in our city, whereby the roads were not designed for that. And we need to continue to focus on that and plan for it and find the resources necessary to improve them. So I will second the motion if the mayor has made a motion.
I have. Thank you.
With the additional agreement that was just made about the clean equipment.
Yeah, the Tier 4 condition.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilmember Lyons.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question for our staff, and I don't want to get down in the weeds, it's late, but I just do, I would appreciate clarification on the hazardous materials of the pesticides. I didn't understand clearly enough and I'd like you to let me know, there was some talk about the Shea property. Is all the property within the limits of this work, of this property limits, getting mitigated for any hazardous materials?
So the site was reviewed by San Diego County Volunteer Assistance Program, and they came up with a closure letter. They didn't identify any mitigation measures, and neither did the study, and they did conclude that and agreed with the conclusions in the study. However, they would have to do a survey prior to demolition of any structures for asbestos and those type of materials.
Okay, thank you. And my other question has to do with traffic, and I'm feeling from everyone who's spoken that the impacts of the traffic is really poignant and really important. I was reading our traffic study, and I was also looking at our policy number 1.3 and looking at it really carefully, and it's been brought up a lot already. It looked to me in our traffic study that this project is contributing to a level of service of E and F on at the intersections close to the ramps, both southbound and northbound, at Encinitas Boulevard, and also from the ramps to Saxony. And so that sounds to me as though there is a level of service E and F trigger that's happening because of this project. Am I interpreting that correctly, Andrew? Or?
So a couple intersections were evaluated through the environmental assessment and were found to be going to a level in E and F. So that study is consistent with the environmental assessment that was done as part of the housing element.
So it's consistent, and then it doesn't conform with our policy 1.3. Sorry, I thought I heard someone else speaking. I don't want to get down in the weeds. I just want to confirm that I read that correctly. What I want to do, though, is acknowledge that we have some work to do. It's our work to do. It's the developers' work to do, to still work together to figure out how to best resolve the issue of the traffic as we move forward. Because we're not there yet. We're not there right now. I've heard the developer propose that they are willing to work with us on some things there. So I'm thankful for that. But on the other hand, too, it's our duty to make sure we have the right infrastructure across our community, and that infrastructure is tied really closely to what the buildings are that are built and what the land uses are. So this goes back to some comments I've made recently about infrastructure and how important it is for us to understand in advance of the demand for more cars on the road, for us to understand and try to find funding so that we can provide the right infrastructure to accommodate the safe and effective movement of our traffic. So this fits right into that. I think we can work forward from this point to identify whether it's traffic calming, whether it's road overlay, road widening, whether it's just safe access for pedestrians and bicycles. It's our duty to do that for this neighborhood. And I would present that forward as a friendly amendment to the motion if my colleagues agree.
I didn't quite follow what the amendment was. Can you state it more concisely?
That we address the traffic and bicycle and pedestrian impacts this development has to the surrounding roads in a manner that is responsive to the additional volume of traffic.
I mean, I think that might be outside of the appeal. I don't know if the attorney wants to weigh in on that, because we're basically, the issues before us are the appeal issues, right?
Correct. So the question before you is whether this project complies with the objective standards, and if not, then what conditions would be necessary to make sure that it does comply with the objective standards, and if they can't comply, then you would certainly make those findings to the contrary. What I'm hearing you say is there's a desire, not relating to this particular project, but in general, that maybe on a future agenda, that there might be things that could be accomplished to make this occur? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, it could go that way if it can't go this way. Sometimes when we have an appeal, and excuse me for not knowing, sometimes I know we're limited what we can do if it's an appeal, but this is the first time it's come before us. So what I'm seeing is there's some question in my mind about how well we've conformed with our policy 1.3 in regards to level of service impacts. And that might be the place where we could inject this friendly amendment to say, let's thoroughly consider that and see if are some things we can do under this umbrella.
Well, let's have Roy actually answer this question specifically about level of service. I feel like this came up in my briefing, and Roy, can you address this question of level of service?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to reiterate what's in the staff report, that I believe what Councilwoman Lyons is talking about is referencing the environmental assessment that was done as part of the housing element. In that assessment, it identified certain intersections that would result in an E or an F. At that time, the overriding considerations and findings that needed to be made for consistency with Policy 1.3 were made at that time. What's before you tonight is a project with a traffic analysis that identifies that there are no new impacts at intersections that would rise to the level of, or that would result in an E or an F. So the project that's before you tonight, based on the analysis that was conducted by the applicant's traffic engineer, is not going to result in a level of E or an F. So because of that, there are no impacts to traffic based on the analysis. So if the desire is to work with the applicant to identify opportunities for pedestrian and bike improvements, that would be something that it's voluntary, and it's working collaboratively with the applicant with their consent. However, we don't have the legal authority based on the analysis that's before you tonight to require them.
I think I understand that. Is that because the EA was cumulative impacts of traffic, and this is the single?
Yes.
Project?
So because it's a by right project and it's not subject to CEQA, that the level of analysis was not as extensive than the analysis that was conducted as part of the environmental assessment. So
And since on our mobility element, we do identify pedestrian and bicycle connection on Union, we do have that trigger for the developer to share a fair share of the development of a safe connection there.
So regarding the fair share, again, this is it's something that the applicant is volunteering to do, to contribute. Because there is no capital improvement project on Union or Saxony, even though there is a bike lane identified in one of our policy documents that they're volunteering to contribute towards the future development of those infrastructure. Unfortunately, we don't have a capital improvement project in the books that gives us the authority to require the applicant to either contribute or construct the improvements consistent with the capital improvement project. So,
And it has been brought forward as something that they will volunteer to assist with.
that's correct.
Yes, that's what I thought. Okay, well, I'm glad to know that, and that answers my questions. What I like to do next is and I try to do this with all of the housing projects that come before us, I want to acknowledge where I think this housing development has done a good job, and I'd like to communicate that to the developer, to the community, as far as what lens I'm looking at it from. I know my colleagues have already brought some bigger picture ideas forward, but I do want to point out that I appreciate that it's achieving the level of 20% affordable. That's above and beyond. I do want to point out that the reduction in the total number, because this could have been 100 more units than it is, and some developments go that direction. This one didn't. I appreciate that. I know they've added amenities like EV charging, like bike parking. I know they plan to keep Puebla closed. It's outside of their influence anyway, but I appreciate that to help blend with the context. I like that there's things like a dog park, a pollinator garden, landscaping, and street trees. I see that they've conformed with objective standards for height, mass, and landscaping. I know that there's bike and pedestrian connections throughout the community, and I appreciate that. I know that there will be noise walls along the I-5 corridor, and that I-5 is a visual a resource, a view shed, and they're being sensitive to what that looks like from the public view. And let's see. Undergrounding of utilities. Also, the water for the irrigation is a reclaimed water source. And that the percentage of lot coverage is less than allowed, which would mean that there's more open space than they needed to provide. So I appreciate all of those elements, and I think together they work to help blend better with the community, both visually and functionally, and I think that will be successful. So I appreciate that that's been the focus of the development. And I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kranz.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on Councilmember Lyons' thoughts regarding the possible amendment to the motion and the commitment to addressing issues related to traffic and walkability and bikeability. And I think that that's appropriate for the council, and I know that we can't bind future councils, but I just think that it's really important that we acknowledge and commit to addressing that particular issue of bikeability, walkability, and calming traffic. I did notice in looking at this particular project, Poinsettia Park has homes that the backyards abut Puebla Street, and they, as part of their project, obviously had to put in sidewalks on Puebla Street. But when it gets to Del Riego, the sidewalks stop. And so, those are the sort of things that we have consistently looked to creating safe routes to schools, for example, safe routes to parks, and a big part of that is the construction of sidewalks. And so, to me, we need to commit to that. And the reality is that the city was founded based upon the notion that development would bring with it the infrastructure that would make the connections that everybody needs, and it has not worked effectively on Saxony especially. One Channel Islands has a very nice frontage. Poinsettia Park has great frontage. The projects that were built as part of the Encinitas Ranch Development Agreement have great frontage. They've got sidewalks, it's walkable, but the old parts of Saxony are still without any walking facilities, and I think that that's the sort of thing that we need to address, and especially on a street like Saxony. Dick Stern and Chris Calkins and the others who came tonight and spoke to the issues related to Quail Gardens Drive and Saxony and Encinitas Boulevard and Lucchetti Boulevard are spot on. And the next city council needs to be prepared to, without any delay, start working to address that particular, all those streets, and looking for ways to calm traffic and discourage people from cutting through. So I'm going to be here no matter what for the next couple of years, and I'm not going to let this die.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, so I think we have a motion. Would you like to read it back to us?
So the motion is the staff recommendation, which is to adopt a resolution, and the correct resolution number is 2022-96, titled A Resolution of the City of Encinitas City Council to Approve Appeal 005568-2022, Western National Properties, overturning the Planning Commission determination, deny Appeal 005572-2022, Clark Development Action Group, and approving the density bonus, design review permit, boundary adjustment, minor use permit modification, and coastal development to demolish 2 existing single-family homes and accessory structures, consolidate 4 existing lots into 1 lot, and construct a 199-unit apartment development, 159 market rate and 40 low-income affordable units, including a leasing and amenity space, private outdoor recreation space, signage, grading, and landscaping improvements, and temporary construction trailer for the property located at 662, 672, and 682 Clark Avenue and 556 Union Street. And then it includes the case numbers. And then this motion is amended to include a condition of approval requiring Tier 4 with DPF equipment.
And even though we didn't amend it to take into consideration Councilmember Lyons' direction, it sounds like staff is amenable to taking direction to work with the developer on mobility and safety options for some of these roadways. So that would be just direction.
Well, and just to clarify, so some of these things that were mentioned, like the cutting back of the tree or painting it red or various things that seem like they're not, this isn't conditioning it specifically, but that they're open to doing it when it becomes clear that it's either desired or it improves the situation. Is that basically what it is? So this will be a bit iterative as it moves forward? Is that what that is understood by both Roy and the developer?
That is correct.
And so, yeah, so part of and I think we heard this in public comments where there's a variety of different opinions on what is an improvement or not. And so the question of it being a rural road and we don't want improvements, or we do want improvements in limited space, how will this happen in terms of how will we be involved with the community in a way to be able to tell what is needed? Or how will the city approach it?
I guess I would ask the council if that is your desire to include the community in the discussion. My understanding is that the question was asked, the coordination with staff and the applicant during the construction to ensure that there are additional measures that will be taken to improve the street. That's what I said, yes, that's understood. That would be the coordination during the construction phase that we'll be working with the applicant. If the council is,
I mean, here, I'll just stop you there and say that I do think that that's the right role for the city, given our knowledge of what's required and also a lot of back and forth that our traffic department has about the different desires. I don't see there as being a workable way, and I don't think that the applicant would accept, some sort of a working group or something, because that's just, it seems like that would be just not practical at this point.
based on what the applicant indicated in terms of what they're willing to do, that's on the record, those are the things that we'll be working with the applicant to implement.
Okay. Okay, then that I'm comfortable with that. Okay, so we have a motion and a second, so let's go ahead and vote on that.
I just wanted to
Yes.
clarify, so is it just amended to include the condition of approval requiring the Tier 4?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly.
Direction.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'll take that out. Motion does carry unanimously with Councilmember Hinsey absent.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We have one last item on our agenda, which is a council member initiated item from Councilmember Kranz and Deputy Mayor Mosca regarding exploring a July 4th community celebration in the community of Encinitas and forming city staff support for citizen committee. So I'll hand it over to both of you to take.
Really briefly, needless to say, there were a lot of members of the community that were a bit saddened and wanting to find different ways to ensure that we can celebrate 4th of July in Encinitas, and specifically in the new Encinitas area of our city. And so, so this is just a measure that we're putting before you to get approval to move forward with allowing this community group to work with the city to go through the process of getting all the boxes checked for a permit to do a 4th of July parade, and maybe even more like a fun run in the community of the New Encinitas area.
I like the idea of a fun run or something that's not a parade, because it did seem like that was too much. And there are so many 4th of July parades, and it's such an impact on the businesses. I like this run idea or other community celebration, just off the top of my head. Go ahead, Councilmember Kranz.
Yes, and most of this is pretty much off the top of the head, but what we had was a group of people that is prepared to sit down, private group, strategize, come up with some community celebration ideas, including nonprofit and other organizations that would be able to, put together some ideas about how to celebrate, and whether, it ends up being the 4th of July or maybe whatever day that was suggested to us tonight.
Summer solstice.
Summer solstice. This would be something that this private group would bring forward. But what we were asked to get council direction to the city manager to ask her staff to help facilitate the conversation and answer questions and be prepared to engage. And it may come back with an application, and it may, if things come together, it may come back with an application that asks us to make an exception to our policy and approve it for 2023. But at this point, it's early in the process, and we just wanted to ask staff to be prepared to help.
And there's a lot of events on the western portion of our city, and not as many community events in New Encinitas. And so this is really about kind of bringing together an event that could bring a lot of folks together in New Encinitas and Levenheim area. Of course, everybody's welcome to it, but it really is about an event that's going to allow for just greater gathering abilities in New Encinitas area. So, it could be a parade, it could be a run, but this gives them, a community group, an opportunity to kind of really put some stuff together and see what would work in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, it seemed like a good, well-written staff report, or council member report, asking for staff involvement, so I thought it was a good idea. Do you want to make a motion? Or do you want to speak, Councilmember Lyons?
Yes, I do. I just want to say I'm thrilled about this. I think it's a great idea for all the reasons you've mentioned. Having been so involved in the founding and launching of our Ciclovia Encinitas event, I don't take it as a small thing how difficult it is to do these kinds of things. And so, patience but still going through the process and saying that we want the city to be at the table, our public community, and maybe even some nonprofits is a perfect way to start. So thanks for bringing it forward.
I would also point out that one of the people that's involved in the brainstorming is Steve Liebherz, who runs the Kook Run and is now doing the Moonlight Beach stuff. So he is well aware of just what's involved in putting an event like this together. So we have some experienced people that are going to engage in this.
That's great. Do we need a motion? Do you want to make it?
I would move that we direct staff to work with this private citizens group to develop a permit for a 4th of July celebration.
For 2023.
For 2023.
Or if they wanted to do solstice, they could consider a
Sure. A community-
summer or
yes.
Yeah.
Mid-year. And I think the key is, and that's one of the things that staff will be looking at, is what part of our 12-month calendar does this fit in most effectively? And so
And the key too is to allow it for 2023, that we would be basically, the city would allow this community group to explore all of these ideas and details and explore it with the idea that it would happen in the summer of 2023.
Okay, good. So that was a motion and a second from Deputy Mayor Mosca. Did you get that, City Clerk?
I think so. So I have City Council direction to have staff work with the Citizen Committee to prepare a major special event permit application for a 2023 summer celebration event.
Yeah. That sounds right.
Let's correct that. And that motion does carry unanimously with Councilmember Hinsey absent.
Okay. Councilmember reports pursuant to AB 1234. Councilmember Grounds.
I can't think any.
Okay.
I don't have anything.
Nothing.
Okay, I'll just share the one update from Sandag is that we did finally get approval from the Air Resources Board at Sandag for the regional plan. So that was just like getting HCD approval, that's a really big deal. We also have asked for Sandag to come back and staff to come back with options to immediately remove the road user charge. So the plan would be amended to do that, and we wouldn't wait for the next cycle, which would be all the way till 2024, 2025, but to do an amendment. So that's something we'll be talking about in the upcoming meeting, but continues to be of great interest to some members of the community. So I wanted to make sure and share it with you. City manager report. Okay, city attorney report.
No report.
City clerk report.
No report?
Assistant city clerk report. Sheriff report. Okay. Well, with that, we are officially adjourned. We'll see you next week, same time, same place.
Okay, you got that? The last one?